The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Hi, it's Thom Hartmann Book Club, and today we're reading from What Would Jefferson Do? And this is from the chapter Warlords, Theocrats, and Aristocrats Rise Again. The subchapter Theocrats Attack Democracy. And the epigraph that we started the chapter with is from President Abraham Lincoln, where he said, "I am approached with the most opposite opinions and advice, and by men who are equally certain that they represent the divine will. I hope it will not be irreverent of me to say that if it is probable that God would reveal his will on such a point so connected with my duty, it might be supposed he would reveal it directly to me." The subhead of the chapter, America is a Christian nation. No, it's a nation where a lot of Christians live. And I write about Judge Moore and his Ten Commandments thing and his statement that, America was founded in Christianity, and then proceed to share the founders' actual view on this. Our founders were both well-schooled in the history of the Crusades and knew from firsthand experience with Puritanism how oppressive religious men could be, even with small amounts of political power. Ben Franklin fled Boston when he was a teenager, in part to escape the oppressive environment created by politically powerful preachers. And for the rest of his life, he was openly hostile to the idea of a secular power being wielded by those who hold also religious power. Although he was fascinated by the spiritual experience, Franklin had little use for the organized religions of his day. In his autobiographical Toward the Mystery, he wrote, quote, "I have found Christian dogma unintelligible. Early in life, I absented myself from Christian assemblies," end quote. In his autobiography, Franklin talks about how he came to this way of thinking, quote, "My parents had early given me religious impressions and brought me through my childhood piously in the Puritan way. But I was scarce 15 when, after doubting by turns of several points, as I found them disputed in the different books I read, I began to doubt of revelation itself. Some books against deism fell into my hands. They were said to be the substance of sermons preached at Boyle's lectures. It happened that they wrought an effect on me quite contrary to what was intended by them, for the arguments of the deists, which were quoted to be refuted, appeared to me much stronger than the refutations, and I soon became a thorough deist," end of quote. Franklin, like most of the more well-known founders, was a deist, subscribing to a philosophy made popular by Unitarians who held that the Creator made the universe long ago and has since chosen not to interfere in any way, that, that neither Jesus nor anybody else was divine, or alternatively, that we are all divine, and that there is only one God and not three. Another founding deist who resisted giving political power to those with religious power was George Washington. Jefferson's diary entry for February 1st, 1799 reads, quote, "When the clergy addressed General Washington on his departure from the government, it was observed in their consultation that he had never, on any occasion, said a word to the public which showed a belief in the Christian religion, and they thought that they should so pen their address as to force him, at length, to declare fidelity whether he was a Christian or not. They did so. However," Jefferson noted, "the old fox was too cunning for them. He answered every article of their address, particularly except that which he passed over without even notice." Jefferson concluded that Washington, quote, "never did say a word on the subject in any of his public papers, and that Governor Morris, a close friend of Washington's, has often told me that General Washington believed no more in that Christian system than he himself did, than Governor Morris did," end of quote, from Jefferson. In fact, President George Washington supervised the language of a treaty with African Muslims that explicitly stated that the United States was a secular nation. The treaty with Tripoli, worked out under Washington's guidance and then signed into law the next year by John Adams in 1797, reads, quote, "As the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, as it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslims, and as the said states never have entered into any war or act of hostility against any Muslim nation, it is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries, end of quote. But for the founders, this wasn't just an issue of being Christian or not. They didn't want any organized religion mixing its functions with government. For example, on February 21st, 1811, President James Madison vetoed a bill passed by Congress that authorized government payments to a church in Washington, D.C. to help the poor. Faith-based initiatives were a clear violation, in Madison's mind, of the First Amendment doctrine of separation of church and state, and could lead to a dangerous transfer of political power to religious leaders. Caring for the poor was a public and civic duty, a function of government, and should not be allowed to become a hole through which churches could reach and seize political power or the taxpayer's purse. Funding a church to provide for the poor would establish, in Madison's words, a legal agency, a legal precedent that would break down the walls of separation the founders had put between church and states to protect Americans from religious zealots gaining political power. Thus, Madison said in his veto message to Congress, he was striking down the proposed law because it helped a church to, quote, provide for the support of the poor and the education of poor children of the same, which, Madison warned, would be a precedent for giving to religious societies. That would be giving federal funds. Now, things have certainly changed since then with the faith-based initiative program that started under Reagan has now exploded. But anyhow, the book is What Would Jefferson Do?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Well, what an interesting weekend. On Friday, Iran went to the polls and voted for Hassan Rouhani, the president who cut the deal with President Barack Obama to denuclearize Iran and bring them into the world of nations. Now, you know, I get it that Rouhani, while he has the title of president, and he has some considerable power associated with that, he's still got the mullahs above him. So you can't really say that Iran is a complete democracy or anything like that, but this is still moving in a very, very positive direction. Right? This is what happened on Friday. And in fact, I think one of the reasons why it's so significant is Rouhani won 74% of the vote. They had an over 70% turnout. This was massive. And when Rouhani was running for office, he said things like his main opponent was a guy named Ibrahim Raisi, and Raisi had been a judge on a court that, on behalf of Ayatollah Khomeini, way back in the day, back in '88, I think it was, executed a bunch of political prisoners. And so Rouhani trashed him for that, for being, you know, like a right-wing extremist. He says, you know, the people who say no to those who over the course of 38 years only execute, the people will say no, in other words, vote for me instead of this guy, to those who over the course of 38 years only executed and jailed. Raisi was on this death commission. Rouhani said, those of you who cut out tongues and sew mouths shut, those of you who over the past years only issue the word banned the pen and banned the pictures, please don't even breathe the word freedom, for it shames freedom. This is how he ran for president. Now, yeah, I mean, you know, he's arguably an insider. It's sort of like they elected, Obama instead of Bernie. I mean, it's not like Rouhani is some incredible guy who's going to just, but the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of Iranians in an election, 3/4 of them, said we want better relationships with the rest of the world. The next day, Donald Trump goes to Saudi Arabia, which has never held an election, at least for senior leadership, never held an election. It's a friggin' kingdom. Every single person in power there is in power because they're members of the Lucky Sperm Club, because who their fathers were. And he goes to, Iran is making reforms with regard to women and education and healthcare. I mean, all kinds of, frankly, good stuff is happening in Iran. And Trump goes to Saudi Arabia, and they bring all these other Sunni Arab countries in. Now, the leader of Iraq was there, but he's not, he's a Kurd. So, to the best of my knowledge, I mean, I went through the list. I don't, King Jordan, or the king, what's his name, of Jordan, the king of Jordan was there. And he's a Hashemite. And yeah, Abdullah II, thank you, Troy. And I think that the Hashemites are, I don't know that much about, but what I do know is that Donald Trump essentially declared war on Shiism. That what happened Saturday, and this, Louise and I had lunch Saturday with a friend of ours, and just by coincidence, I mean, this is brunch. We had scheduled this like a week ago. And he was born in Iran, came to the United States years ago, back in the 70s, has done very well for himself here. Has been back to Iran, in fact, met with President Khatami. He's a very progressive guy. And he had just, on the way over to the restaurant where we met him for brunch, he had heard Trump's speech, and he was trembling. I mean, he was just shocked. And he was like, I am seeing the beginning of World War III. This is the creating of an other. And it hit me, he's absolutely right. Trump has decided, he's got to have an enemy. And for a while, his enemy was China. But, then President Xi came over and gave him some presents and acknowledged him. And so, his enemy isn't China anymore. He's sort of, Mexico is sort of his enemy. But then he figured, a bunch of American companies came from him and said, we do $500 billion a year in business with Mexico. You don't want to screw that up. He's like, oh, okay, all right. So who's going to be our enemy? Well, how about that country that Obama got to deal with, Iran? There's a war inside the Islamic world going on between between Shiism and Sunnism, between the Sunnis and the Shias, and this goes all the way back to the death of Muhammad and the battle for secession. Was it going to be his relative or his student? And this was the beginning of the Sunni-Shia split. And this war is still going on, and we just took sides in it. It looks to me like Donald Trump has just, like the United States has just officially taken the side of the Sunnis in the Sunni-Shia conflict. And who are the Shiite countries? I mean, Iran is now majority Shiite. Excuse me, Iraq is a majority Shiite. Of course, Iran is. And Syria. And we're lining ourselves up with these Sunni dictatorships. Most of the people in that group were never elected. They were all hereditary, not all, virtually all hereditary monarchs. And this just concerns me tremendously. Here's what Donald Trump, here's the piece of his speech that were I in Iran, I would be freaked. And I want to share with you, Rouhani's actually responded to this now, and his response is encouraging. But here's the president. Here is Donald Trump.
Until the Iranian regime is willing to be a partner for peace, all nations of conscience must work together to isolate Iran, deny it funding for terrorism, cannot do it. And pray for the day when the Iranian people have the just and righteous government they so richly deserve. The decisions we make will affect countless lives. Until the Iranian regime...
Yeah, and he goes on. Until the, it's just he's so, Rouhani then, he said, our nation's message in the election was clear. This is Rouhani. Iran's nation chose the path of interaction with the world away from violence and extremism. He just came, that's it. He said it. Trita Parsi, president of the National Iranian American Council, more, moderate Iranian ancestry, brilliant scholar, Trita Parsi. He wrote, Rouhani's convincing win is a sharp rebuke to Iran's unelected institutions that were a significant brake on progress during Rouhani's first term. It was also a rebuke of Washington hawks who openly called for either a boycott of the vote or for the hardline candidate Raisi to win in order to hasten a confrontation. So now, now Trump is in Israel. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens when he goes to meet with the leader of the Palestinian Authority. But right now it's all so much of this is just song and dance. And we'll see where it all goes. But I'm so concerned. I feel that the Saudis completely played Trump. He said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to come in," and they were like, "Oh great, let's pull together a bunch of Muslim nations, all Sunni or close to it, and let's isolate Iran." I mean, it's like right after the United States just had 8 years of foreign policy of trying to bring Iran into the world.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This just concerns me tremendously. Medea Benjamin's going to be with us in our third hour, by the way. We'll talk about this at some greater length. And welcome back. Noel in Riverside, California. Hey, Noel, what's up?
Yay, praise the Lord. I beat out John from, where is he, from Michigan, or for the first caller every week.
Okay. All right.
That was my goal for the day.
Okay.
I wanted to say on Iran that remember why the real reason was we invaded Iraq? Oil. Iran is what, the fourth or fifth major oil distributor or
producer, yeah.
Possessor of oil in the land. So is it a wonder why, out of all the countries over there, they're being targeted? They want the oil, just like they did in Iraq. And let me remind everybody, prayer works. So keep praying for, the Democrats.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sounds like a plan. Thanks a lot, Noel. Dion in Round Lake, Illinois. Hey, Dion, what's up?
Yes, Thom, I know a lot of the Trump supporters were against the refugee crisis. They were against nation building and terrorism. Isn't Trump going to strengthen the terrorist state in Saudi Arabia and escalate the civil war? And possibly, we know that Iran is allied with China and Russia. This could also lead to a threat to World War III.
That was my point. That was my point. And then he goes, with the golden, with the etheric orb, right, to launch the Counterterrorism Center, which is 50 guys sitting on computers looking at something. What are they looking at? I'm guessing they're looking at communications of people inside Saudi Arabia, because this is a police state. This is an absolutely repressive police state. Wilbur Ross, our Commerce Secretary, came back earlier and was interviewed earlier, and he said, not a single protester. People over there love us. Well, of course there wasn't a single protester. It's a damn police state. I mean, anyhow, yeah. I see that happening, Dion. I really do. Thanks for the call, and thanks for watching us on YouTube. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say really quickly, and they're wonderful hosts. I mean, they treat you very well because you have something maybe that they want. They're going to fawn on you, and that's their way of getting what they want. But I wanted to say, you know, when is it that the United States has really promoted democracy outside of this country? It seems to me that a lot of our foreign policy is just the opposite. And, you know, we have revelations of people like the person that wrote, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He was on your show. I'm always really...
Yeah, John Perkins.
Depressed because of that. And I know a lot of Iranians, also, and they're wonderful people. It's a very old culture, and we have a lot to learn from them. But I think that there's just something in our DNA, apparently, that thinks that, it's democracy for a certain group of people. Maybe it's white people. Maybe it's, people of a certain religion. We always have to have an enemy. I think money enters into it because that makes a lot of money for people who build arms and support that. But I don't really see that there are very many groups of people really promoting peace throughout the world and the promise of at the end of World War II, of world peace, of having an institution like the United Nations to end all war.
Yeah, we've got a big job ahead of us if we're going to try and end all war. John, thank you. We'll be back. So my Iranian friend, he's an American now, has been for many years, that Louise and I had brunch with on Sunday. He made the point that separation feeds war, that we need to be bringing people together rather than identifying, the other, that light without love or heart isn't really light. It's like Lucifer, right? This is my phrase. It is fear. It's separation from life. He said that Trump was speaking of terrorism without any understanding of what is causing terrorism. Well, I would add to that the incredible irony of going to Saudi Arabia and saying we've got to stop those who promote and fund terrorism when 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were Saudis. And Saudi Arabia is the largest funder of Wahhabist, a.k.a. extremist mullahs all around the world right now. And, Trump goes and puts his hands on the psychic orb, and suddenly, and the magic walk to the anti-terrorism center, the King Salman anti-terrorism center. Well, Saudi Arabia is a police state. I mean, no wonder Trump felt comfortable there, right? He's surrounded by billionaires. They're hereditary billionaires. There are no women allowed. And by the way, if you grab them by the crotch, they cannot protest. They can't even go to court without the permission of their husbands or fathers. I mean, Trump must have thought he just died and gone to heaven. Anyhow, my friend, he said, to put in our minds a reference point in fear of the other, which then Trump defines who is this other. Well, in this case, it's going to be Iran. And he's going to tell us who to be afraid of. Iran that just had an election where 74% of their population said, we want reform. We want to engage with the rest of the world. Another of his points was, my friend is a Sufi mystic also. He said that mercy is the most powerful force. These people are lacking. These men, the Trump and the people around him are lacking in mercy. And, which I think is just so very, very true. Saudi Arabia is a brutal, brutal country. You get out of line. I mean, they imprison political protesters. There are people in prison for tweeting things about the king. You do not speak out in Saudi Arabia. Somebody needs to tell Wilbur Ross that. And then he said, not meeting the needs of our own people nor around the world, so a few rich can control everything. They want to hoard it all. Racism, hatred, hate of the less privileged. It's in the interests of money and power to have a war. Have you seen this website, by the way? It's supposed to be secret. It says there's a little banner on it that says, do not share this website, right? Private link, do not share. It's officialmikepence.com. Officialmikepence.com. Yep, up at the top. Are you a homosexual? If yes, click here. Okay, click there, and it takes me to hell.com. Sorry. Back to Pence. Officialmikepence.com. Pence Christ 46. See you tomorrow. For tomorrow is now today. The 46th President of the United States, Mike Pence. Mike's story. A former U.S. Congressman and governor for the state of Indiana, President Mike Pence is proud to serve the white and Christian population of America for more than 2 decades. Born in Columbus, Indiana on June 7, 1959, to wholesome heterosexual couple Edward and Nancy Pence, Michael Richard Pence was named after his grandfather, Richard, who immigrated to America from the non-Muslim majority country of Ireland, settling with his family in the American Midwest. And then, there's graphics and, number of gays who've returned to the Lord today, 382. Wow. Mike Facts. Well, anyway. Meanwhile, we're learning that last week, before Donald Trump left town, and I'm going to get into this in the next hour because Alex Lawson is going to drop by. We're going to talk about this briefly. But Donald Trump turned to his inner circle, part of his cabinet and some of his advisors in the White House, and said, let's just sabotage Obamacare. Let's just refuse to make the payments to the insurance companies that subsidize insurance for low and middle-income people. $7 billion this month. They've decided the administration has decided they're going to pay through the end of May. Well, that's another week and a half. 2 weeks. But after that, if we don't, what'll it do? It will blow up Obamacare. And they're betting that we won't know what caused it. That we'll just think, Obama, he created such a lousy system, that Obamacare thing. It's amazing what is going on. We'll be back with more.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
More of the news of the day and your calls right after.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from my newest book, Adult ADHD. The first edition, or the first draft or version of which I actually wrote some 20 years ago, but it's we've updated it and reissued it, and I think you'll find it really interesting. This is from the introduction. There's a substantial subpopulation of the world that has a common and somewhat consistent set of personality characteristics. These traits have, for many people, led to difficulties in school, relationships, and work, and are collectively known among psychologists and psychiatrists as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. When researching this subject, I was struck by the number of ADHD adults I met and interviewed who'd chosen to become entrepreneurs, to strike out on their own, to forge their own unique lifestyles and businesses independent of others. Most often, these people are involved in an ever-changing life, often starting many businesses or regularly leading their existing companies in new directions. They thrive on stimulation and living on the edge. One biography of Ben Franklin asserts that he was America and possibly the world's first real entrepreneur, because rather than simply learning a trade and opening a lifelong business, he learned dozens of trades and created more than 30 businesses, as well as social and governmental institutions, the post office, libraries, all kinds of things Ben Franklin created for this country. This creation of something new over and over again is the core of entrepreneurship, whether you're a company owner or an entrepreneur within a company where your job constantly involves new projects or change. When writing an earlier book, Attention Deficit Disorder, A Different Perception, I heard from a psychologist who specializes in ADHD that perhaps as many as half of all entrepreneurs have ADHD. Now, a few years later, and after conversations with thousands of entrepreneurs around the country, I've come to the conclusion that nearly all entrepreneurs have ADHD to one extent or another. And I would add probably the vast majority of salespeople as well. I'm not speaking here of the fellow who carefully invests his money in a corner dry cleaning shop, runs his own business on that corner for 25 years to finally retire comfortably. While that person may meet some definitions of entrepreneurship, I'd rather refer to him as an independent small business person. Such people constitute an important and stable core of the business life of their community and of this country. Instead, I'm speaking here of those individuals who create or participate in dynamic, thriving, ever-growing, ever-changing companies. I'm speaking of the ones who take chances, who experiment. Henry Ford, who had several bankruptcies before he hit on a formula that worked. Or Thomas Edison, who tried thousands of different variations before he could get a working light bulb. These people's lives are often littered with failures, but their successes have given a spark of vitality and enterprise to America and made our country, particularly in its early days, unique in the world. They continue to bring us innovation and change that give great hope and promise for the future of our nation and the world. Some have applied their entrepreneurial characteristics to become great leaders. John F. Kennedy and Winston Churchill, for example, stand out. Others have created inventions, businesses, social institutions, and art that have changed the world. This book is about people who have overcome their challenges and in many cases actually used aspects of their ADHD to achieve prosperity or victory, and for those who would seek to emulate them. This book is for those who are willing to take chances, to forge a new niche in this business, social, cultural, political, or art worlds, or to create something new, and how to do that successfully. In the writing of this book, I've interviewed many people in the business world, including some of America's greatest. Few would want to jump up and raise their hands and say, yes, I have something that psychiatrists call a disorder. Nonetheless, all were, to my mind, hunters, my term for people with attention deficit hyperactivity disorders described in this book, to one extent or another. They shared stories of their successes and failures from childhood through advanced age that were remarkably similar. From these stories and my own successes and failures as a business person and entrepreneur, I've assembled a collection of specific tools and techniques for people with ADHD to achieve success in the business world. And then, we get into chapter 1, the nature of ADHD. We all experience a spectrum of levels of states of consciousness as we go through moment to moment on daily life. On one end of the spectrum is the very open, distractible state that we experience when driving or walking on a busy street, noticing all the events around us, alert to everything in our environment. At the other end of the spectrum are the tightly focused states of consciousness in which we're so intent on the book we're reading or the conversation we're having that the ticking of the clock in the room or the drone of traffic outside ceases to exist. When in a normal and relaxed state of consciousness, most people fall into a place somewhere between these two extremes of open and focused. They shift from open to focused and back with relative ease. It's difficult for the average person, however, to maintain either an extremely focused or an extremely open state of consciousness for hours at a time without such things as meditation training or the use of drugs like caffeine. The natural tendency is to snap back to the center line between the two states, which is to have a little bit of both. Some people, however, have an off-center baseline state of consciousness as their norm. Estimates vary between experts and researchers, but these people may represent as few as 10 or as much as 40% of the population. And this is the beginning of that difference that makes for ADHD and how it can be a tool, a useful thing, something that can actually help people succeed in the world. So this is our book report, our book reading today from my book, Adult ADHD, How to Succeed as a Hunter in a Farmer's World.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Mike in Clarksville, Indiana. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. So,
few points here. First, a little correction, I think. You mentioned the Muslim nations that are Shiite majority. There's about 25 Muslim nations in the world, and there's really only three that are Shiite majority populations. Iran, Iraq, and I don't think it's Syria. Actually, I think it's Lebanon.
Yeah,
that may have changed after these last 6 wars, or last 6 years of civil war.
Yeah.
It might be Syria as well. Now there might be 4. That's the first point. The second point, a lot of what's going on here, of course, has to do with Israel. Maybe our closest ally in the world. The UK, of course, is real close, but Israel has a special relationship, of course, and it's the conservative Likud party, which is dominating over there for the last decade or two. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, they see it as their enemy as the Shiites instead of the Sunnis, which is pretty interesting because I think it has to do with the law of social cycle, which Dr. Ravi Batra talks about in a lot of his books, but whenever he's on this show, he's talking about the economy. But the law of social cycle is that there's only 3 categories of people in the world that rule nations, and that's warriors, wealth acquisitors, and intellectuals. And the other category is laborers, but it's really the first 3. So the Arab world, the Muslim world, I should say, is going through a transformation like all other parts of the world, from the old religious order, which is the Shiites, now into the wealth acquisitive age, Saudi Arabia being the dominant because of their control over oil. And it's moving really slowly through those lands. And I've talked to a lot of young Iranians, Americans like me, and all of them seem to be against the idea of the religious rule in Iran.
Right.
From the Ayatollah because, of the change in culture that happened in 1979 so quickly.
No, I get that, but the Saudis are using religion as the excuse for their repression as well. I mean,
that's right. But it's their control over wealth, the money that is really
well, Iran is also a very wealthy nation.
That's right, but they're not able to sell their oil across the world as easily as Saudi Arabia because all the sanctions.
Yeah,
But there's one more point. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, go for it.
The Syria thing, and this is the link with Russia. This is really important. The intellectual rule right now is in Russia and is in Iran. And it goes back to the clergy, has a lot of power in Russia as well. But they're being pressed by the younger generations and the new movement of wealth acquisitors. The rule of wealth is going, they're trying to push into Putin's regime and the Ayatollah. So Trump and company, Kushner, Israel, are trying to use that advantage to push them out. And this, unfortunately, it's the neocons who have the influence now over Trump, not the Bannon crowd.
Yeah, that everything you said up until that last sentence, I think we could discuss or debate or whatever. I mean, it's kind of intellectual constructs. But the fact of the matter is that Donald Trump campaigned as a guy who was not an interventionist. He was not going to get us in the middle of foreign policies, and other countries' problems and things like that. And no more nation building, blah, blah, blah. He started out his speech in Saudi Arabia saying, I haven't come here to lecture you on how to be. And then he goes ahead and lectures them on how to be, or at least lectures around on how to be. And I think that's really what it all comes down to. I think you nailed it there, Mike. Mike, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Dave in Armstrong Creek, Wisconsin. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hi, Tom. It's been a while since I've talked to you. Greetings from Armstrong Creek.
Thank you. Nice to hear from you.
The point I wanted to
Dave.
make was, the big stopover in Saudi Arabia I think the whole point of it was to complete that, whatever it was, $120 billion arms deal.
Right.
And as you pointed out, to isolate Iran in the speech that he made. And, all that arms deal is going to do is just enhance the Saudis' military adventures, and not only in Yemen, but all around the region.
Right.
And it seems to me the only people that really benefit are these arms dealers and the wealthy, and the people on the short end of the stick in all these conflicts are always the civilians.
Yeah.
And especially in Yemen right now, they've got people are not only getting bombed, but they're starving to death, and there's a cholera outbreak now.
There's a half million people dying right now as we speak in Yemen as a consequence of Saudi bombing against the Houthis, and who Donald Trump called terrorists in a speech day before yesterday.
Right.
I mean, or yesterday, I guess.
One other thing, I got a question for you. Who do you think is the largest consumer of petroleum fuels in the world at this point right now?
Probably the Pentagon, but I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, it's the U.S. military. They consume more fuels, diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel than any other,
right. Oh, we've got 700 plus military bases all around the planet, and we're continually testing our equipment. We've got lots and lots of it, and so that it's not surprising. I know the U.S. military also considers global warming a national security issue, and is also has put a lot of money into green technologies and into greening the military.
Well, that would be good, except the whole point is to kill people.
I understand. Dave, thank you for the call. John in Long Beach, Mississippi. Hey, John. Mike Pence is president?
Yes. Hello.
Oh, did you go to that website, officialmikepence.com?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
But I just want to thank you very much for giving me this time to talk to you, and I do appreciate your program. I don't believe Donald Trump was earmarked to become president to begin with. I think he made it that way, but he only made it that way because of the news and the media, and Pence perhaps. It's just my go on it. It's an opinion. Pence is earmarked to be president from the very beginning. The corporate world, the Mellons, the Koch brothers, and every one of them that feed into the system with their money can buy people into it. We're controlled more by the corporations, and they have, as you said, they have more to say in our politics than we as individuals. So my only question is very simply this. If religion is the opium of the people, and our political world is controlled by those people who have tremendous power over us, how do we stand a chance in overcoming this dogma? I mean, what can we do in order to overcome this idiotic nonsense that controls us?
Yeah. Which particular idiotic nonsense are you referring to?
Well, the corporations. I mean, they
corporate power in this country
that alienates us. They stratify us by making things fade in and out by things get old. Your parts break down in your car or whatever. You have to go out and buy new ones. Things become obsolescent. They fade things in and out. The corporations are doing this to us in every which way, and I like to know what can we do about it in order to alleviate these controls. I'm even afraid to go to a doctor, for Christ's sakes, because they may call for me to have an operation, and they may not even need one, just to make money. This greed is overcoming.
Yeah, I get your point, and this is, I mean, at every level, wherever you look, you see this going on. The Saudis just said that they're going to put $20 billion into U.S. infrastructure. And, which sounds nice on the surface, right? But here's how they're doing it. They put $20 billion into a hedge fund called Blackstone, which is, owned by a billionaire, buddy of Donald Trump's, presumably. And Blackstone has created a public investment fund. It's called BX. And they put $20 billion into it. It's an infrastructure fund So, well, this is the story from MarketWatch, okay, marketwatch.com. The country's public investment fund agreed to commit $20 billion to Blackstone's BX New Infrastructure Fund in the latest push around the world by large investors to buy up airports, pipelines, and other public projects, particularly in the U.S. And so, you know, they're beginning the process of privatizing all of our public facilities, our airports, our roads, our bridges, anything that they can then put a toll, you know, on and make money off of, and, you know, get these things out of the hands of government. And it's just the power of money is not going to be broken until the ability of money, of wealth, to own politicians is broken. This is what Henry Wallace was talking about in 1944 in the New York Times. He said that they reach out for political power so that once having achieved it, they can combine it with their economic power in the marketplace and keep the average man in eternal subjection. And that's exactly what it's all about. And that's why MoveToAmend.org and getting that We the People amendment passed is so important, to get money out of politics. And then we can get it out of everything else. John, thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back, Rich in Greenwood, Indiana. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Tom, I think you must have a psychic wave that knows when to drop me into the conversation.
How so?
Beautiful.
Okay.
I wanted to offer an observation based on listening to Oliver Stone during a fundraiser, Free Speech TV and Democracy Now!. Amy was replaying her interview with Oliver Stone as he was talking about his documentary, I think it's Unspoken or Secret History of the United States.
Yeah.
And he was explaining how the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima and the playing out of the war, of the Second World War, were elements designed to consolidate military/political power for the United States and the Axis powers after the war, as organized through the Dulles brothers as these players that were building the chessboard or stacking the deck with the crumbling empire of Great Britain, so as to have the biggest pile of cookie crumbs at the end of the conflict. And what was described of Harry Truman having said he dropped the bomb and it wasn't a military thing that made it necessary, but that it was a posturing thing to show everybody.
It was to scare Joe Stalin. At least the second bomb was.
Right. And the point of that was stated by Stone saying, quoting Truman, well, we may have let this thing out of the box by doing what we've done, but we're never going to fall behind. We will always be in front of all this. You know, we will be the nuclear power.
Right. Just like the Romans said, right? Just like the Greeks said.
I don't have that level of detail.
No, my point is that this is the story of empires. It's what the Brits said. It's what the Brits said 200 years ago. It's it's what the Dutch were saying 400 years ago.
Yeah.
It's what Napoleon, the French Empire under Napoleon, was saying. It's
last week Holbert was talking about how the Kurds were split into the corners of 3 different countries,
right?
And that is this same idea that you've just described. How do you disable something? You stay ahead of everything by by disempowering and consolidating power, setting people against each other in order to be permitted to stand back and watch them, do a free-for-all. And then you step in from time to time and beat down the winner. And therein is the strategy that we're seeing being played out right now. And we're talking, we're always having this idea of things being two-faced, and there being this this lack of truthfulness. And
got to wrap it up, Rich.
Well, the idea is that it's designed to be that way.
Rich, I'm sorry, we're out of time. So let me just, kind of summarize the point that I intended to start this hour out with, and I sort of, instead of just saying it, just kind of got, blundered around it. And that is that it appears to me that the neoconservatives have won. That the Steve Bannon faction or the libertarian faction or the anti-neoconservative faction or the we're not going to be the world's policeman faction within the Trump administration, which controlled the Trump campaign, because these were the positions that Trump took when he ran, that's gone. And it has been replaced by, John Bolton and company. I mean, by that ideology, by the total, by neoconservative, Jeb and George Bush. I mean, this is George W. Bush all over again. This is let's have a war. A great way to get people to stop talking about how corrupt your own administration is. Well, let's just have a war. The neoconservatives have clearly taken over the Trump administration. And hard right neoconservatives, they love Saudi Arabia, they love Netanyahu's party in Israel. They, we'll see what happens when they get to Europe. It's going to be a whole different thing. But, I think that the Saudis played Trump for a complete sucker. I really do. I think they got him to take a position, to put America in the middle of the inter-Islamic civil war, essentially, that's been going on for hundreds of years. And, slick move. All it took was, a gold thing and get him to curtsy and all that kind of stuff, a gold medal, and give him lots of gold and show him lots of gold and lots of pomp and ceremony, and everything will be good. Right. Thurgood in Chicago. Hey, Thurgood, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. Enjoying the program as always. I just wanted to just very briefly point out some of the ridiculous hypocrisies. The West preaching to Islam, the Middle East, about being peaceful and the like. I mean, it's my recollection that we essentially installed a dictator. His name was the Shah of Iran.
Yep.
There were democratic elections. We installed the Shah. He was a brutal dictator. I never will forget as an undergrad, reading about this, the front page of the Tribune, that the CIA had conspired with the factions there
with the military.
Exactly, yep. And that they engaged in torture to suppress people.
Yes,
I saw it on Frontline.
The Shah was famous for it. And it's one of the reasons why it's taken so long for Iran to kind of recover from that. The Shah was famous for his brutality. We also installed Saddam Hussein in Iraq,
who battled against them for a 10-year stint of Iraq against Iran,
right,
engaging in war. He was out, and I recall pictures of Donald Rumsfeld visiting with Saddam Hussein
to sell him poison gas that he was using against the Iranians.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's
Why doesn't our press point this out? I'm just some guy from Chicago calling the Thom Hartmann show. Where is CNN? Where is MSNBC? Where is the New York Times critiquing and giving the American people perspective in this moment?
Yeah, introspection is not something our media can do well, and history is not something they do well, and it's all very, very tragic. Thurgood, thank you. You're spot on. I appreciate the call. Scott in Canaan, Maine. Hey, Scott, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I didn't think I was going to get you today. Your other caller had just left. He's absolutely right, and you were absolutely right about Trump being played. He did get played, our big famous negotiator. So,
yeah. Probably gave $100 million to his daughter.
Oh, yeah, it's a great thing. He's such a negotiator. But listen, I had a quick question and a comment. I wanted to know, where in our history did we decide to go down the path of Sparta? I mean, who do we think we are, really? You know, the pot calling the kettle black. And the second question is,
well, I think we're about to see the Peloponnesian Wars. Am I pronouncing it right? Peloponnesian Wars. It's one of those words that I've read and I've never heard said out loud. But anyhow, as
we're headed there pretty quick.
Yeah, Thucydides' enigma or dilemma or whatever the phrase is. I'm drawing back on old history here, but the idea that as empires. As old empires crumble and as new empires emerge, war is almost always the result. Back to you, Scott. I'm sorry.
I have a question, Tom. Sorry. I wanted to know that they're talking about basically going to beat the poor up. I mean, we're going to get it good by the Congress and the Senate. Why have they not even approached the possibility of doing something with their retirement plan? They're totally separate from.
Who's this they that you're talking about?
Federal, and their automatic pay raises.
You're talking about members of Congress.
Yeah, and the Senate. Why haven't they? Why are they going to beat up on the poor? Why everybody's?
Well, they got beat up on the poor because they got to have tax cuts for the right-wing billionaires, and they've got to continue the $400 billion a year subsidy to the fossil fuel industry.
Why they're paying attention to Trump? The Senate and the House is getting ready to strip Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. It's there.
I know. It's going to be my next hour, Scott.
It's going to be an awful thing, man. People are literally going to die. When are people going to realize that there's more of us than there are of them? We have to throw them all out and then build the wall.
Yeah.
That would be a great thing.
Well,
all right, Tom. I appreciate talking to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Scott. Nice to hear from you. So what we have to deal with is voter suppression and gerrymandering. I mean, basically, the Republicans have rigged the game of politics in the United States to their own advantage. And in the states where you've got these voter suppression laws, you see that you put a voter suppression law into effect, and it cuts Republican voting by about 3%. And it cuts Democratic voting by about 8% because people who are young or people who are retired or people who are poor or live inside big cities are more likely to vote Democratic, and they're less likely to have these narrow forms of ID that are increasingly being required in more and more draconian ways by the states. So you've got that, plus you've got the gerrymandering that came about in 2000, and we have a Congress controlled by Republicans when the majority of the people who got votes were Democrats. You've got a Republican in the White House when the Democrat got 3 million more votes than he did. I mean, you've got a Senate that doesn't represent America.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. Today we're reading from my book, Rebooting the American Dream. This is Chapter 1, Bring My Job Home. And we're about halfway into the chapter here. It starts out with this section called The High Cost of Free Trade. During the 1930s, none of the Asian powerhouse economies had adopted American industrialization strategies. So when Franklin Roosevelt put money into workers' pockets and they bought toys or clothes or radios, all those items were made in Alabama or Connecticut or Michigan. Now they're made in China, which experienced a labor shortage in 2009, causing its average wage to increase from 80 cents an hour to $1.14 an hour, and its economy to grow by more than 8%. China has been following the lead of Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea during the past half-century and has become an industrial powerhouse as a result. And ironically, each of these countries got its strategy from us. George Washington's Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, proposed it in 1791. And by 1793, most of the parts of his report on the subject of manufactures had been instituted as a series of legislative and policy steps. And it didn't start with Hamilton. He was just building on King Henry VII's Tudor Plan of 1485, which turned England from a backwater state with raw wool as its chief export into a major developed state that was producing fine clothing and other textile products from wool. He accomplished this by severely restricting the export of wool from England with high export tariffs and restricting the import of finished woolen goods with high import tariffs. King Henry learned this from the Dutch. They copied the Romans, and the Romans got it from the Greeks 3,000 years ago. Nonetheless, President Obama continues to follow his predecessors, Bush Jr., Clinton, Bush Sr., and Reagan, all in the religious belief that free trade will save us all. It's all nonsense. Free trade is a guaranteed ticket to the poorhouse for any nation, and the evidence is overwhelming. Even the phrase free trade was introduced by King Henry VII back in the 1400s as something that England should encourage other countries to do while it maintained protectionism. A more contemporary example of the application of that wisdom could be seen in South Korea. In the 1960s, South Korea was an undeveloped nation whose major exports were human hair for wigs and fish, and whose average annual income was around $400 per working family. Today, it's a major industrial power with an average annual per capita income of more than $32,000, and it beats the United States in its rate of college attendance, exports, and lifespan. Korea did this by closing its economy and promoting its export industries. A decade earlier, Japan had done the same thing. 40 years earlier, Germany had done it. In July of 2009, with no evident irony or understanding of how South Korea went about becoming a modern economic powerhouse, President Obama lectured the countries of Africa during his visit to Ghana. As the New York Times reported, quote, Mr. Obama said that when his father came to the United States, his home country of Kenya had an economy about as large as that of South Korea per capita. Today, he noted, Kenya remains impoverished and politically unstable, while South Korea has become an economic powerhouse, end quote. In that day's newspaper, or the next day's newspaper, the lead editorial titled Tangled Trade Talks repeated the essence of the mantra of its confused op-ed writer, Thomas L. Friedman, that so-called free trade is the solution to a nation's economic ills. But South Korea did not ride the free trade train to success. South Korean economist Ha Joon-ching details South Korea's economic ascent in his 2007 book, Bad Samaritans, The Myth of Free Trade and the Secret History of Capitalism. In 1961, South Korea was, as the president said, as poor as Kenya, with an $82 per capita annual income and many obstacles to economic growth. South Korea's main exports were primary commodities,
such as tungsten, fish, and human hair for wigs. And that's how the Korean technology giant Samsung started, by exporting fish, fruits, and vegetables. Today, it's the world's largest conglomerate by revenue, $173 billion. By throwing out free trade and embracing protectionism during the 1960s, South Korea managed to do in 50 years what it took the United States 100 and Britain 150 years to do. After a military coup in 61, General Park Chung-hee implemented short-term plans for South Korea's economic development. He instituted the Heavy and Chemical Industrialization Program, and South Korea's first steel mill and modern shipyard went into production. South Korea also began producing its own cars and used import tariffs to discourage imports. Electronics, machinery, and chemical plants soon followed, all sponsored or subsidized and tariff protected by the government. Between 1972 and 1979, the per capita income grew more than 5 times. In addition, new protectionist slogans were adopted by South Korean citizens. For example, it was viewed as a civic duty to report anyone caught smoking foreign cigarettes. All the money made from exports went into developing industry. South Korea enacted import bans, high tariffs, and excise taxes on thousands of products. South Korea's transformation was, to quote Chang, as if Haiti had turned into Switzerland. This transformation was accomplished through protecting fledgling industries with high tariffs and subsidies, and only by gradually opening itself to global competition. In addition, the government ran or heavily funded many of the larger industries, at least until they were globally competitive. The government ran or regulated the banks and therefore the credit. It controlled foreign exchange and used its currency reserves to import machinery and industrial products. Now, I'm not suggesting that latter part for the United States, but the fact of the matter is that protecting your economy works. And we're basically the only developed country in the world that doesn't do it any longer. Rebooting the American Dream is the book.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and in the studio with me, Alex Lawson, the Executive Director of Social Security Works, the owner of We Act Radio, weactradio.com, and socialsecurityworks.org. You can tweet him at ALaw202, as famous Alex Lawson Twitter account. Alex, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
And also, thank you for filling in for me all these times.
I should thank you. It is very difficult. I don't know how you do it all the time, but it is so much fun. Your listeners are just really fantastic.
Well, thank you. I have a good time. But in any case, Social Security Works. Let's putting your working hat on here. Mm-hmm. You just came from Congress.
Yeah, we
just came from a briefing about.
Yeah, we have the information from the budget. We actually have seen the leaked budget as well. The budget is leaked all over because it's coming out tomorrow.
This is the Republican budget.
I'd say it's Trump's budget. So it's the president's budget, and which, as you know, is not actually, it's more of a blueprint, right? It's like, This is his wish list. But it is definitely a statement of morals and values, right? This is what he believes in. Right. Now, this document is basically saying to Congress, this is what the president wants you to do. Now, the Congress is where it actually, the rubber meets the road. And so there's a large, this document that I'm pointing to the talking points of is so repugnant. It's so unpopular. The stuff that's in there, massive cuts to Social Security, to Medicaid, to other critical programs. And where Trump is right now, I don't see the congressional Republicans really wanting to run with this pair of scissors. But, I've seen them do really stupid things before. So we're going to have to fight it.
You shared with me, they're talking, these are the Republican talking points. And I can see Fox News quoting them. They're saying Trump campaigned that he wasn't going to touch Medicare or Social Security, and he's not going to touch core benefits in Social Security. What the hell does that mean?
Right. That is exactly what's in there. You can see this little parsing that they're doing. And the thing is,
no, seriously, what does it mean when they say that they're not going to cut core Social Security benefits, yet they're going to cut Social Security? How do they do that?
Because they're trying to pretend that any benefits in Social Security are not core, and that's just false, right? All of the benefits that you earn, that I earn, they're our benefits. We're paying into them, and they're all core benefits. It's calculated by one equation that says this is how much your benefits are. But what they're talking about is they're trying to pretend like there's two Social Securities, the good Social Security and the bad Social Security. And they're only going to go after the bad Social Security.
So the good Social Security in their mind is people retired over 66, 67 years old, 65 if they were younger, which doesn't make any sense, but you know what I mean.
Right.
And because Reagan's, he raised the retirement age 2 years, and it's rolling into place right now. So that's the good Social Security that they're not gonna mess with. That's the popular Social Security. Then there's the roughly 1/3 of the Social Security budget, which is care for widows, orphans, disabled people. This is Social Security disability insurance.
Right.
And that they're going to cut?
That is what they're planning, the disability side. And the idea that they're trying to paint as if you can do that, as if you can actually cut it in one side and not the other. But that's just not how the system works. It's like saying, I'm not going to cut the military budget. I'm just going to zero out the Marines, right? You're like, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Right. And I will just say there is only one Social Security. One. We all earn it, and he's coming to cut it. And that is what's going on here.
And we all pay into it. And the disability side of it is that, you as a young guy, people working with you over at WEAC Radio who are a whole lot younger than either one of us, whether you're 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, 50, however old, 5 years old in the United States, you have a lifetime insurance policy that if you are disabled and you are unable to care for yourself, unable to work or unable to care for yourself, that insurance policy kicks in and we will take care of you. We are us. We are family. We are America. And that's Social Security disability insurance. And so when my friend Michael Hutchison went running in Phoenix or in Santa Fe one night and fell over a bridge on a piece of ice and broke his neck and was paralyzed from the neck down for the next 10 years that he lived before he finally died, every day he was paid for by Social Security disability insurance. He was only in his 40s, I think, late 40s at that time. But he was disabled. The Republicans figured disabled people are far less likely to vote, which I'm guessing is probably true. So therefore, they can just take a whack out of Social Security disability, and nobody's going to notice.
I think it's that coupled with the oldest trick of tyrants going back, to ancient times, which is the tyrant will take the people who they're oppressing and point them at each other, right? So that they're fighting each other.
Divide and conquer.
Divide and conquer, so that they don't stand in solidarity and point at the tyrant who's actually doing everything.
So they're trying to get the disabled people, or they're trying to get retired people to say, okay, yeah, get rid of those disabled people, because if you don't, then it's going to cut my benefits.
And exactly, while what's actually happening is that they're cutting their own benefits, right? So they're getting folks who they're making people scared, like, you're going to lose your benefits unless you do what I say. And then what they say is cut their own benefits. Because if you believe that once they open this door into cutting Social Security, their dream for 82 years, their fantasy, as long as Paul Ryan's been dreaming about this in the keg lines, right, multiplied by 40, that's how big Social Security is in their kind of worldview. As soon as they get an inch, they're going to keep on going, and they're never going to stop until they dismantle the entire program to give to their criminal friends on Wall Street. That's just what it's about. And that is what is in this budget. That is the amorality that we see in this budget. This is about an attack on working families, an attack on the American people.
So how are the Republicans going to roll this thing out? Fox will reliably support them. Right-wing hate radio will support them. The right-wing media infrastructure in the United States, the Wall Street Journal, with the New York Post, all the Murdoch publications will support them, and point out that they're not going to cut Social Security. They're going to absolutely protect the core program.
Right. But even the Washington Post and some of these elite news outlets have been, just pushing Social Security cuts for decades, especially the Washington Post. Pete Peterson just has a section of that newspaper. So it's not going to be, my worry is that it's not going to be confined just to the right wing, that this is a new thing. It's plays into an old playbook, but the brazenness is new. And what I worry about is that all of the media is going to fall along with it. They're going to they're going to do their job, and they're going to report sticking to his promise. He's not cutting Social Security, just Social Security disability, as if those are two different things. And as soon as that idea is out there and accepted, I don't think we can put the genie back in the bottle. So we have to be out there. Truth tellers have to be out there saying this is a cut to Social Security.
Yeah. And you can read all about this, I assume, over at socialsecurityworks.org.
Yep. And we'll have blog posts up by Nancy Altman as soon as we actually have the actual details of the budget.
Yeah. And they're going to be rolling this out while Trump is still traveling?
I think so. I mean,
great way to get the American people not to really notice what's going on.
And also lessens the certainty that Trump would mangle the rollout if he were involved in it. That it'll allow them to control the message better.
He might accidentally tell the truth.
Exactly.
We can't have that. Oh, man. Alex Lawson is with us. He is the executive director of Social Security Works. A-Law 202 or at SS Works. Remarkable. Alex, what should people do?
They should call their senators. They should call their representative. They should state very forcefully, absolutely not one penny cut from Medicaid, not one penny cut from Social Security. And we fully reject this budget. And also, if you sign your name to this budget, if you support this budget, elected official, you are supporting cutting Social Security benefits. Everyone should say that. We're saying that, and we're going to remember, literally anyone who supports this will have supported cuts to Social Security. And that will be very important in November.
Yeah, and the year after.
And the year after, and the year after, and the year after.
Amen. Alex Lawson with Social Security Works. Alex, you're doing great work.
Thanks,
You're doing
Tom.
spectacular work. And this cannot stand. You're absolutely right. The telephone number for Congress is 202-225-3121. 202-225-3121. You have two members of the Senate, one member of the House of Representatives. If you don't know who they are, give them your zip code. They will tell you, and they will connect you. Give them a call, 202-225-3121. Do not cut Social Security.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And check out socialsecurityworks.org. Be sure to check it out, Alex Lawson. Alex, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
We'll be back. And welcome back. Michael in Imperial Beach, California. Hey, Michael, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hey, Mr. Hartman. I just watched Green World Rising with you and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
Okay, 5 points. Since 95% of world scientists believe climate change is the result of human activity, since most Republicans in charge of our government believe climate change is a hoax, since 62 people in the world have as much wealth as 3.5 billion people, since a seed bank, SEED, bank has been built in Norway, and since the ultra-wealthy are building extravagant bunkers the size of small towns, what are we little people supposed to conclude from these facts?
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, that there's a storm coming, Michael. Michael, thank you for the call. That's it's a good list. And by the way, the seed bank in Svalbard, Norway, is now, which was supposed to be solid forever. They're having to completely reinforce it now because the tundra around it is melting and the snow has been turned into rain and it's being invaded by water, right? The seed bank that was supposed to protect us. It's really quite remarkable. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hi, Dr. Tom. I wanted to make a comment about this $110 billion arms deal, which is actually just the first part of it. It's a $350 billion deal over 10 years.
Right.
And I cannot understand why Saudi Arabia, which is protected by, 60 of our bases, so there's a ring of bases around Saudi Arabia, what they need these arms for. Do they intend to declare war on the continent of Africa or something and march all the way to South Africa?
God only knows. Well, they've already declared war on Yemen, essentially.
Yeah,
and they've got problems with Somalia. But I think one of the most unreported pieces of this was the so-called 2030 plan, where by 2030, right now, Saudi Arabia manufactures 3% of their own military equipment, and they want to make that 50% by 2030. That's in 13 years from now. So,
see, our carrier is sitting off the coast of Yemen, servicing their planes, giving them fuel and weapons and maintenance on our carrier, which cost us about $1 million a day. But I cannot understand why they would need such an extensive, long-range war plan of arms unless they intend to go to war. And that gives them
I think they do. I think they intend to go to war with Iran.
Yeah, but, then, too, you think about Africa and their influence over there, buying, a third of Ethiopia. They're involved in Nigeria. They were involved in Egypt in overthrowing the Muslim Brotherhood or whatever it was. And, what happened to the gold in Libya? Where is it? Who got it? And in Morocco, you have fighting over the mining. So what is the purpose of a 10-year plan of $350 billion worth of arms and weapons?
Yeah. What is the Saudi long game? I think that probably a lot of it is also going to be directed at their own people. They have a rising youth unemployment rate. I think it's around 15% right now. And it's one of the reasons why they want to develop an arms industry in Saudi Arabia so that they can bring jobs to Saudi Arabia, jobs that they're going to take away from the United States. I don't think Donald Trump has figured that one out either yet. Oh, Norma, thank you for the call. I don't have the answer to your question, but I think it's a really important question that we all should be asking. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Amazing goings on. Amazing goings on. The Robert Mackey, writing over at The Intercept. This is just a brilliant piece. Landslide win for Iran's reformists doesn't fit Trump's script, so he ignores it. And the hypocrisy of America's support for unelected despots in the oil-rich Gulf states is not new, but Donald Trump's lavish praise for them on Sunday as allies against Islamist extremism and the oppression of women was particularly striking, coming one day after Iranian voters danced in the streets to celebrate their reformist president's landslide re-election. And yes, they were literally dancing in the streets. You can see, on social media, it's all over the place. People, yeah, we're going to have a democracy. This is the moderates in Iran. No more of those crazy guys. No more of those theocrats. No more of those, and then Saudi Arabia, and then we throw in with Saudi Arabia and say, no, we're not. Are you kidding? Theocracy is a fine thing, right? It's and kingdoms, warlords, they're billionaires. They control oil. This is important stuff. Plus, they treat me so nice, says Donald Trump. Oh, gee, they love me there. And Wilbur Ross comes back to the United States and goes, I didn't see any protesters at all. You don't realize you're in a police state? It's something that, by the way, was almost never mentioned in our media. Toby Keith goes over and does an all-male concert for all men. But they gave $100 million to Ivanka's fund for women wealthy women to get better books on how to treat their maids or something. Some variation on that. Helen in Ithaca, New York. Hey, Helen, thanks for listening on 1470 AM. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Happy Monday. Or
Thank you.
Try to have one.
Yeah, there you go.
That was real sad news about the budget Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. And I will call 202-225-3121. So I wanted to say something that's sort of funny, but it would be funnier if it wasn't true. But it has to do with, like, hypocrisy. You were talking about religion earlier, like these kind of hypocritical religious maniacs, you know, whatever religion it is, you know. But I consider Mike Pence to be one. He was raised Roman Catholic as I was. Irish Roman Catholic, the same thing. My grandparents were born in Ireland. Okay, this isn't for my life story. But I just heard about the new, you know, how Trump's cabinet has to be the antithesis of every department that they're supposed to be in charge of. Like, you know, having Dracula in charge of the blood bank.
Right.
Having the Fox the ambassador to the Hen House. All right, he just decided an ambassador to the Vatican. I feel sorry for the Pope to have to put up with this. So he assigned Calista Gingrich, Newt Gingrich's third wife, who was cheating on him with when he was married to his second wife.
While he was prosecuting Bill Clinton.
Pardon?
While he was prosecuting Bill Clinton for you know, getting a BJ in the White House.
Yeah. And so, but she was raised Catholic also, and then she became a Lutheran, and then she went back to being a Catholic, and then she got Newt Gingrich to convert to Catholicism, and now she is the ambassador to the Vatican. So I just had to snort.
It hasn't. I don't think it's been officially announced, has it? I knew it was.
I don't know. He might be bringing her with him, for all I know. But the poor Pope, who's a pretty decent guy, he's got to meet our president in a day and a half or something.
Yeah.
And then he's going to have to put up with her as the ambassador. So I just think, you know, that's what they want to do. They put all these people who are incompetent or actually the antithesis of what they're supposed to be doing, and then government will prove that it can't do anything right, so we'll shrink it and drown it in the bathtub.
Yeah, no, it's an old
everything.
Yeah, it's an old playbook, and we've seen it before. Helen, thanks for the call. Thank you. Excellent points. Lisa in Los Angeles. Hey, Lisa, what's up? Lisa?
Oh, hi. Yes, I want to thank you for the segment on the Social Security disability cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just suggesting that, like, the media put up some sort of cross double screen with Trump mocking the disabled reporter and Paul Ryan applauding it or laughing at it. I mean, this is it's just horrible, and I want to thank you for pointing it out.
Yeah, these guys have no mercy, they have no heart, they have no empathy. We're looking at what happens when sociopaths rise to power, and it's happened in the Republican Party. And what's drawn these sociopaths is the massive amount of money that has been thrown into the Republican Party by the petro-billionaires in the United States and the chemical billionaires in the United States, the polluting industry billionaires, shall we say. And they're certainly getting their money's worth out of these politicians. But my concern, in addition to the damage that this is doing to average Americans and to the lives and futures of our young people, is that Trump is also leading us in the direction of World War III. This just scares the hell out of me. Lisa, thank you very much for the call. Thanks for listening to SiriusXM. We'll be back in just a moment with more of your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day. Right after this statement.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
By the way, do you disagree with me? Do you think that Trump was not played by the Saudis? Do you think he somehow got something out of this? Love to hear from you. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Donut Economics, brand new book by Kate Raworth, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. And on page 21 in the Who Wants to Be an Economist chapter, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist, here they are. Whether you consider yourself an economic veteran or novice, now is the time to uncover the economic graffiti that lingers in all of our minds. And if you don't like what you find, scrub it out, or better still, paint it over with new images that far better serve our needs and times. The rest of this book proposes 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist, revealing for each of those 7 ways the spurious image that has occupied our minds, how it has come to be so powerful, and the damaging influence it has had. But the time for mere critique is past, which is why the focus here is on creating new images that capture the essential principles to guide us now. The diagrams in this book aim to summarize that leap from old to new economic thinking. Taken together, they set out, quite literally, a new big picture for the 21st century economist. So here's a whirlwind tour of the ideas and images at the heart of donut economics. First, change the goal. For over 70 years, economics has been fixated on GDP, or national output, as its primary measure of progress. That fixation has been used to justify extreme inequalities of income and wealth, coupled with unprecedented destruction of the living world. For the 21st century, a far bigger goal is needed: meeting the human needs of every person within the means of our life-giving planet. And that goal is encapsulated in the concept of the donut. The challenge now is to create economies, local to global, that help to bring all of humanity into the donut's safe and just space. Instead of pursuing ever-increasing GDP, it's time to discover how to thrive in balance. Second, see the big picture. Mainstream economics depicts the whole economy with just one extremely limited image, the circular flow diagram. Its limitations have furthermore been used to reinforce a neoliberal narrative about the efficiency of the market, the incompetence of the state, the domesticity of the household, and the tragedy of the commons. It is time to draw the economy anew, embedding it within society and within nature and powered by the sun. This new depiction invites new narratives about the power of the market, the partnership of the state, the core role of the household, and the creativity of the commons. Third, nurture human nature. At the heart of 20th century economics stands the portrait of rational economic man. He has told us that we are self-interested, isolated, calculating, fixed in taste, and dominant over nature. And his portrait has shaped who we have become. But human nature is far richer than this. As early sketches of our new self-portrait reveal, we are social, interdependent, approximating, fluid in values, and dependent upon the living world. What's more, it is indeed possible to nurture human nature in ways that give us a far greater chance of getting into the donut's safe and just space. Fourth, get savvy with systems. The ironic crisscross of the market supply and demand curves is the first diagram that every economic student encounters. But it is rooted in misplaced 19th century metaphors of mechanical equilibrium. A far smarter starting point for understanding the economy's dynamism is systems thinking, summed up by a simple pair of feedback loops. Putting such dynamics at the heart of economics opens up many new insights, from the boom and bust of financial markets to the self-reinforcing nature of economic inequality and the tipping points of climate change. It's time to stop searching for the economy's elusive control levers and start rewarding it as an ever-evolving, complex system. Fifth, design to distribute. In the 20th century, one simple curve, the Kuznets curve, whispered a powerful message on inequality. It has to get worse before it can get better, and growth will eventually make it up, or even it up. But inequality, it turns out, is not an economic necessity. It is a design failure. 21st century economists will recognize that there are many ways to design economies to be far more distributive of the value that they generate, an idea best represented as a network of flows. It means that going beyond redistributing income to exploring ways to redistributing wealth, particularly the wealth that lies in controlling land, enterprise, technology, knowledge, and the power to create money. Sixth, create to regenerate. Economic theory has long portrayed a clean environment as a luxury good, affordable only for the well-off. This view was reinforced by the environmental Kuznets curve, which once again whispered that pollution has to get worse before it can get better, and growth will eventually clean it up. But there is no such law. Ecological degradation is simply the result of degenerative industrial design. This century needs economic thinking that unleashes regenerative design in order to create a circular, not linear, economy, and to restore humans as full participants to Earth's cyclical processes of life. Seventh, be agnostic about growth. One diagram in economic theory is so dangerous that it's actually never drawn, the long-term path of GDP growth. Mainstream economics views endless economic growth as a must, but nothing in nature grows forever, and the attempt to buck that trend is raising tough questions in high-income but low-growth countries. The book, Donut Economics.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
You can support the Thom Hartmann Program and see video of our entire 3-hour show over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And plugging myself back in, always a good idea. Oh, my. Here, Dave in Huffman Estates, Illinois. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I got a question. I asked on Saturday. I don't generally like to repeat, like there's some that have, but this one is like when they've been rumblings already about Trump being impeached. And I was just curious, obviously could take another 1.5 years, 2 years once they got it rolling. Would Pence be also allowed to still run both of his tours as a president? Finish out Trump's, say, 2 years to 1.5 years, and then and then 2 terms of his own?
I don't believe so.
Because I didn't know if you needed to have a pause in between.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that I'd have to go back and read the 20, whatever it is, 4th or 5th or 6th. 26th, 27th, 28th Amendment. I'd have to go back and read it, but I'm pretty sure that basically 8 years is what you get.
Scary, you'd get 10 years of that guy, possibly.
Yeah. No, Mike. Oh God save us from Mike Pence. Check out officialmikepence.com. You'll see what I'm talking about. But no, I don't think he could. In fact, I'm quite sure he couldn't. Dave, thank you for the call. Kelly in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Hey, Kelly, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I really admire your books and your show, and I was thinking all weekend about the conversation about white supremacy, and I'm really glad to follow your reading of Dyson's book, because male supremacy is exponentially a bigger problem than any of these racial issues. Because look into any of the individual races, and they've been enslaving women for countless generations. And so when you don't have more than half the population contributing and competing, like he was just saying, that our politicians, our economy, everything is based on competition, but the competition is just limited to white men. Thank you so much for bringing attention to this. Thank you.
You're welcome, Kelly. And I would point out that Donald Trump just came from Saudi Arabia, the land where men have absolute supremacy, and and arguably the country that is doing the most to export a theology of male supremacy, or that has male supremacy as one of its major cornerstones. Kelly, thank you for the call. George in Santee, California. Hey, George, what's on your mind?
Yes, Tom. Good day to you and everybody at the studio there. I'd just like to make a comment on Donald Trump's speech with the Saudis yesterday after he announced that $110 billion arms deal or whatever. He kind of portrayed that as this is a battle of good versus evil. And I'd just like to remind everybody that when it comes to war, it's evil versus evil. There's no good versus evil. War is a contest of who can be the most evil. And also, I think that it's the American people who are being played as a sucker by all this.
Yeah, by Trump, by his billionaire buddies. Now we've got the petro billionaires in the United States, the Kochs and their buddies, and then of course you got the petro billionaires in Saudi Arabia, and some may call them Muslims, some call themselves Christians, some call themselves agnostics or libertarians or atheists or whatever, but they all really believe in the same religion, which is the power of money. It's mammon. This is the beginning and end of their thing. We are the billionaires and we rule the world. That's their song. George, thank you for your call. Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind?
I just finished your book. Which one?
rebooting the American dream,
Uh-huh.
and you talk about co-ops
Mm-hmm.
and companies. And I also I'm about halfway through with Ellen Brown's Web of Debt.
Mm-hmm.
And in North Dakota they have a bank. Are small businesses able to borrow from their state bank?
I know that farmers can. It was originally set up to loan to farmers, and I'm assuming that probably most farmers in North Dakota are now incorporated. But how that banking system works in great detail, you'd have to ask Ellen Brown. I'm not an authority on it. I just know that it was working really well for them.
I'm in California. I think California is one of our last hopes because we're blue, and we could with like I would talk single payer, some co-ops, high-speed rail.
Well, since you got rid of gerrymandering in California, with that Citizens Commission for reapportionment, the state has just like turned into a Northern Europe. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, well, we're not quite there, but
yeah, but you're moving in the right direction.
If I guess one last thing, so I think that would be, fantastic, because my wife has a small business and she's barely able to survive. And if she could get a loan for 1% from a state bank,
right.
California State Bank, it'd be huge. And one last point, I want to give a shout out to Arizonans to call the governor to sign the to legalization of industrial hemp. It's passed the legislature and the Senate, and it just needs to be signed on his desk, so they could do that.
Okay, cool. Jeff, thank you very much for the call. Bob in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, speaking of legalized hemp. Hey, Bob, what's on your mind?
Hey, thanks, Tom. This is, gosh, there's so many things going on. Yeah, I wonder why it is that even in progressive circles of media, we're not talking about hemp. And then, not enough, not nearly enough. And then it doesn't really reach the politicians. They roll their eyes. I watch everything there is to watch. I watch everything that's not on that I can get my hands on, and I read a lot and do a lot of research. I always have. Hemp is good. Cannabis is good. Monsanto having hold of it and having power over the seed, or the government saying they have a copyright on the seed, that's all wrong. This history is all well known. There's hemp and marijuana being grown everywhere in the world where it can be. And in some instances, it's favored by the government in limited ways. And in other instances, it's just grown anyway, run by the illegal cartel.
Yep.
So how in the world do you expect people to make an adjustment economically and politically without breaking the law all over the world now?
Yeah, no, I bet, Bobby, you're not going to hear any argument from me. Thank you for the call. Andre in, is it Bourbonnais, Illinois?
Correct.
Yeah. Hey, Andre, what's up?
Okay, I just have a question. Maybe you can help me out with this. As far as, I know you said you had a friend that, as far as Iran, and he felt like they were on the way to World War III.
Yeah.
So it seems, I was thinking of it another way, because he doesn't want anything to pretty much have Obama's name on it. So he takes credit for everything. So,
or he tries to tear down anything that has Obama, he's sitting around with his cabinet saying, how do we sabotage Obamacare? Literally.
Exactly. So anything they showed the wall that they said was from the Bush administration, but they went on the news and said that Trump had it, the little piece that was already built. And he's like, oh no, we're putting that up today, and nobody really questions it.
Right.
And then they attacked MS-13, but they said that was from what Obama and them, they already had it going anyway.
Yep.
So he's law and order. So I figure, maybe they don't mention the election in Iran, but then once they come to the table, they'll say Trump's the one who brokered the deal and he's bringing peace to Iran. Now they want to work with Trump.
Well, if America can have a reasonable relationship with Iran, and Iran can move into the League of Nations, not in the Wilsonian sense, but just in the world of civilized dialogue between nations and behavior and activity, I don't care if Donald Trump takes credit for it. But I think what happened was the Saudis played him. The Saudis put him in a position where he's denouncing Iran, and now he's in Israel, and Netanyahu, of course, hates Iran, and as do many Israelis are very concerned about Iran funding Hezbollah and Hamas, and particularly Hezbollah, and Hezbollah, traditionally doing terror attacks against Israel. A lot of Israelis are very upset about that. So, I'm not criticizing Netanyahu for being down on that part of Iranian history. But let's say Iran was to clean all that stuff up. I mean, like back, when they delivered the letter to Bob Ney and said, we're willing to recognize Israel, we're willing to normalize relations, we're willing to forego nuclear weapons. All we want is recognition. This was during the George W. Bush presidency. And Bob Ney was the only member of Congress who spoke Farsi, the language they use in Iran. And he took that letter got that letter to George W. Bush. And a week or so later, he finds himself in prison. And, he wrote a book about it. It's called Sideswiped. And, I read pieces from it on this program from time to time. He was a Republican congressman from Ohio. And, so there's some powerful, Iran's got some powerful enemies between Saudi Arabia and Israel and their interests here in the United States and the politicians. But I think that Saudi Arabia just played Donald Trump. I really do. Andre, thanks for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with, we're going to check in with Talk Media News, and we'll be picking up more of your calls here. And Medea Benjamin will be with us at the top of the next hour. And welcome back. Jerry in Danville, Virginia. Hey, Jerry, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hi, Tom. I just want to talk about this Alexander Hamilton concept of protectionism, which is what the free marketers hate to hear that word. But it seems like to me that you talk about this quite often, but are there any economists like Richard Wolff or any of the other prominent economists who agree with you? Because it seems like to me that most of the people that you talk to about this don't get it.
Yeah. With regard to Richard Wolff, I'm not really sure. I think his issues go way beyond trade. I mean, he's talking about a fundamental re-envisioning of economic systems beyond capitalism. There are a number of economists who absolutely agree with me. And one of them is an advisor to Donald Trump. He used to come on this program with some regularity. And forgive my blanking on his name, but he's there in the White House, and he wrote a very, very good book about how China was eating our lunch and our stupid trade policies. And Chang, I think his first name is Juha, J-O-H-A or J-O-H-A. But in any case, his last name is Chang. He's as I recall, he teaches at Oxford in the UK, and he wrote a book called Pulling the Ladder Up, and he's written 2 or 3 other books since then, but Pulling the Ladder Up was just a seminal one. And it's kind of a history of mercantilism, which is what I'm promoting in rebooting the American Dream, and what Hamilton was promoting. And he tells the story of South Korea. How South Korea went from being, a nothing economy. In 1965, the average South Korean had an income equal to $89 a month, the same as the average Kenyan at that time. And, average wealth in the country was around $500 per person, total per year. The major exports of South Korea were human hair and fish. Mitsubishi started out as a company exporting human hair and fish. And Park Chung-hee, as I recall, was the name of the dictator, President Park, who took over in a military coup in '65 and said, "Okay, screw this. We're going to do what the Americans did in the late 1700s, throughout the 1800s, in the early parts of the 20th century. We're going to do what the Brits did before that. We're going to do what the Brits learned from the Netherlands, from the Dutch. We're going to turn South Korea into a mercantilist economy, and we're going to protect our domestic manufacturers, and we're going to nurture new industries, and we're going to make it very expensive to import things from outside our country. And it was like the example that Chang uses in the book that I think I quoted in Rebooting the American Dream. I think I quoted Chang. And you may find him and his books in the index, was it was as if, Kenya had become Switzerland overnight. I mean, it took about one generation, about 20 years. And just this radical transformation of South Korea. And, to now, being, at the top of their game and a democratic republic and all these positive things. So, yeah, there are a lot of economists who agree. And this, and by the way, these positions prior to 30 years ago were conventional wisdom. Everybody agreed. So, Jerry, I refer you back to the index in Rebooting on that for those books. We'll be right back. Victoria Jones is going to be with us with Talk Media News. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do, The Elements of a Great Working Life. On the line with us, Victoria Jones. Hey, Victoria. Happy Monday.
And happy Monday to you, Tom.
Thank you. So what's going on in the world?
Well, over in Jerusalem, President Trump has been meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And he's been giving remarks. A little earlier, after a meeting with Netanyahu, Trump said that he never mentioned the word or the name Israel in his conversation with Russia's foreign minister and ambassador. And turning to reporters, he said, "So you have another story wrong." But the reports never said that he mentioned Israel when he talked with Russian diplomats the day after he fired FBI Director James Comey. He said they have said that he talked about a source of intelligence.
Yeah, he probably didn't even know what the source was. I don't think he does a dive deep into his paperwork.
And in fact, that was also reported that he might not have known what the source was. So that is going on. He said on his arrival in Tel Aviv, "We have before us a rare opportunity to bring security and stability and peace to this region and to its people." And he reiterated those remarks also just a few minutes ago. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross today praised the lack of protests during President Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia.
Didn't anybody tell him it's a police state?
Let me quote him first. He said this on CNBC. "There was not a single hint of a protester anywhere there during the whole time we were there. Not one guy with a bad placard." The host, Rebecca Quick, did note that the Saudi government does not allow political protests and said, that was probably why. In theory, that could be true, but boy, there was certainly no sign of it, not a single effort of any incursion. Twitter, of course, did go ballistic about this, pointing out that many people preferred to keep their heads.
Yes. I mean, literally, you could be looking at 20, 30 years in prison in Saudi Arabia for speaking out against the government, and or even death and public lashing. I mean, just brutal punishments. There are a lot of people in prison right now in Saudi Arabia for speaking out, using, whether it's on the internet or in print or just in public, against the government. Back to you.
The Times of London is reporting that ISIS has tested deadly poisons on prisoners in Nazi-style experiments as it seeks to develop new chemical weapons, according to documents obtained by the Times. The papers found hidden at Mosul University by Iraqi special forces after it was recaptured from the jihadists record the group's pursuit of chemical weapons and their use of human guinea pigs who died in the testing of at least 2 chemical agents. Now, the documents have been verified as bona fide ISIS papers by U.S. and British forces. And the allies are fearing that the terror network conducted the experiments with a view to targeting Western individuals in future attacks. The chemicals, which are used for pesticides, are easily available. And the papers, written in Arabic, report the production and testing of 2 chemical compounds Now, they poisoned two people who died. And what they used was, in this case, was contaminated food or water. The other case involving nicotine was placing it on his skin and by injection. But the concern about the food is that they could easily poison people with this, and it worked. So this is the ISIS documents included full recipes and instructions for producing the nicotine compound.
Amazing. Meanwhile, the American nicotine industry poisons to the point of death about 500,000 Americans every year, we should note. And Indeed. The American pesticide industry is, depending on who you talk to. Well, anyway, back to you, Victoria.
Thought I'd bring you a bit of news from across the pond. There's an election over there, general election in the UK coming up.
In 3 weeks, right?
Right. Thought you might be interested in the latest for Theresa May. She, who is said she's a big fan of fox hunting. That's just an aside from me. She's the leader of the Conservative Party.
Well, didn't somebody get arrested for yelling out at her this morning because he was like, "Stop the fox hunting"?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Pardon my interrupting you.
Yes, he did. Well, anyway, she called this snap election to consolidate her party's majority in Parliament. Well, she's run into a bit of trouble because of her contentious dementia tax. At least that's what Jeremy Corbyn, the opposition leader, called it, and the name caught on. What it is, actually, is that she announced, without consulting with most of her Conservative colleagues, that it would care costs for, if you're elderly, you would have to pay for all of your health care costs up until the last £100,000. And not surprisingly, everybody starts to go ballistic. So Jeremy Corbyn called it a dementia tax. And the Conservatives said, wait a second, people don't like this. This is going very badly at people's houses when we walk around, because people go door to door over there very much. This is really bad. So today, she's rewritten her dementia tax plan, and she faced the press. And one reporter said, "You're weak and wobbly." Another said that, unlike Margaret Thatcher, the lady is for turning. And she got very agitated, and she said, "Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed." Anyway, she has dropped in the polls by about half over the weekend.
Whoa, that's amazing.
Yes.
You know, what's also amazing is in the United States, and I saw this with my mom. I mean, if you are thinking of, putting an elderly parent who is experiencing actual dementia into a nursing home, you have to wipe out everything. In order to have Medicaid pay for it, you have to be indigent. You have to be broke. You have to spend absolutely every last penny. And all Theresa May was saying is, you can keep your last $100,000, 100,000 pounds, or $110,000. You can keep that, and then the National Health Service will pay for your care. The Brits are pushing back on that, but we put up with, you got to get completely wiped out.
Right.
I find it amazing.
Right. One last quick one. The Supreme Court ruled 5-3 today that North Carolina illegally packed black voters into two voting districts, the 1st District and the 12th District, affirming the district of a lower court, and Clarence Thomas voted with the majority.
They illegally what? Taxed? T-A-C-K-E-D?
Packed black voters into two voting districts.
Oh, yeah, okay. Fascinating. Okay, Victoria Jones with Talk Media News. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. We'll be back. Stick around. Medea Benjamin will be with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
We're reading today from the Thom Hartmann Reader here at Thom Hartmann University. This is from page 13. The title is The Story of Carl. Carl loved books and he loved history. After spending 2 years in the Army as part of the American occupation forces in Japan immediately after World War II, Carl was hoping to graduate from college and teach history, perhaps even at the university level, if he could just hang on to the GI Bill and his day job long enough to get his PhD. But in 1950, when he'd been married just a few months, the surprise came that forced him to drop out of college. His wife was pregnant with their first child. This was an era when husbands worked, wives tended the home, and being a good father and provider was one of the highest callings to which a man could aspire. Carl dropped out of school, kept his 9-to-5 job at a camera shop, got a second job at a metal fabricating plant, working with molten metal from 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. For much of his wife's pregnancy and his newborn son's first year, he slept 3 hours a night and caught up on the weekends. But in the process, he earned enough to get them an apartment and prepare for the costs of raising a family. Over the next 45 years, he continued to work in the steel and machine industry. In the later years, as a bookkeeper manager for a Michigan tool and die company, as 3 more sons were born. Carl knew he was doing the right thing when he took that job in the factory, and he did it enthusiastically. Because the auto industry was unionized, he found he was able to support his entire family, all 4 sons, on 1 paycheck. He had a fully funded health insurance program, an annual vacation, and a good pension waiting for him when he retired. Carl had become a member of the middle class. He may not have achieved his personal dream of teaching history, but he had achieved the American dream. He was self-sufficient and free. Working with molten metal can be dangerous, but the dangers were apparent, and Carl took every protection to protect himself so that he could return home safely to his family. What he didn't realize, however, was that the asbestos used at the casting operation was an insidious poison. He didn't realize that the asbestos industry had known for decades that the stuff could kill, but would continue to profitably market it for another 20 years while actively using its financial muscle to keep the general public in the dark and prevent the government from interfering. A couple of years ago, Carl tripped on the stairs and ended up in the hospital with a compression fracture of his spine. He figured that fall had also caused the terrible pain he'd been experiencing in his abdomen and his chest. Doctors, however, discovered that his lungs were filled with mesothelioma, a rare form of lung cancer that is almost always caused by exposure to asbestos. Mesothelioma is terminal, and its victims die by a slow and painful suffocation. Just because some corporation put profit before people, Carl got screwed. I was Carl's first child. My dad faced a painful death, but at least his job in a union shop left him with health care after retirement. Most Americans don't even have that reassurance anymore. More than 45 million Americans don't have health insurance to cover expenses for a serious illness, and 5 million lost their health insurance between 2001 and 2005, which is when I wrote this. And it's not just illness that worries most Americans today. Americans are working more and making less, getting harder and harder to just get by. There's a reason for the pain Americans are suffering. The America my dad grew up in put people or profits. The America we live in now puts profits above people. In my dad's America, 35% of working people were union members who got a living wage, health insurance, and defined benefit pensions. These union benefits lifted all boats, because they set the floor for employment. For every union job, there was typically a non-union job with similar pay and benefits, meaning roughly 70% of the American workforce back then could raise a family on a single paycheck. People who were disabled and couldn't work could live on Social Security payments, and the elderly knew that they would have a safe retirement, paid for by pensions, Social Security, and Medicare. The gap between the richest and the poorest had shrunk rather than widened. That America is disappearing fast. The minimum wage is not a living wage. Workers are now expected to pay for their own health insurance and their own retirement. Pension plans are disappearing. 30,000 General Motors employees lost theirs just in 2005, and there's continued talk about privatizing Social Security, the Republicans' grand goal. The safety net is ripping apart, and the results are that the middle class is shrinking. The rich are once again getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer. The inflation-adjusted average annual pay of a CEO went up from $7.7 million to $9.6 million just between 2002 and 2004. Meanwhile, from 2002 to 2004, the inflation-adjusted median annual household income went down from $46,058 to $44,300. In other words, ordinary people's income went down by $1,600, while CEO pay went up by $1.8 million a year. From 2001 to 2005, America has lost 2,800 manufacturing jobs just in 3 years. If you don't count jobs produced by the military-industrial complex, the number of private sector jobs created since 2001 decreased by 1,160,000. Although 67% of large employees, well, you get where we're going with this. Anyhow, it's the Thom Hartmann reading.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Medea will be with us in a few minutes on our way over here. ThinkProgress.org. Judd Legume, the editor-in-chief of Think Progress, writing just an absolutely brilliant piece. Wilbur Ross. This was mentioned earlier on in the program, but I've got to share some of the stuff that's in this article by Judd with you. Wilbur Ross, of course, the multi-billionaire investor, member of Donald Trump's cabinet. It's all billionaires and generals, it seems, or mostly. Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary right now. And let me just, this is some of here are some details about Saudi Arabia from Judd's piece. He's talking about Saudi dissidents, excuse me. And he said, one dissident, Walid Abu al-Khair, is serving, quote, a 15-year sentence imposed by Saudi Arabia's terrorism court that convicted him in 2014 on charges stemming solely from his peaceful criticism in media interviews and on social media of, presumably, Saudi human rights abuses. So you complain about human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia, and you get a 15-year prison sentence. And our president, in this ceremony that looked like something out of a bad ancient movie, our president is sitting here with his hands on this sacred orb, and well, yeah, this is just nuts. And Medea Benjamin has shown up, so we'll get into a little more substantive conversation of it in just a moment. Stick around. Coming up on about 9 minutes past the time.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with Medea Benjamin. Stick around. Steve in Orlando, Florida. Hey, Steve. Thanks for watching.
Hi.
What's on your mind today?
I was. This has been bothering me. I wonder if it's true that on January 3rd there will be a window of a few hours where the Democrats will be in control of the Senate, and they could actually confirm Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. It wouldn't be a temporary appointment. It would be a real confirmation.
Right. I have heard that argued on both sides, and I think if the Democrats were Republicans, they would have 100 lawyers on it right now. They'd have 1,000 people ready to go into the streets and chant, like they did down in 2000, and they would do it.
And the Democrats just don't care right now?
Well, it's just that Democrats aren't Republicans. Republicans have this philosophy of the ends justify the means. It doesn't matter if what we're doing contaminates the end product of what gets done. The Republicans are just absolutely committed to having power. I mean, if you just compare this election, for example, to 2000, in 2000, you had literally thousands of Republican operatives and lawyers who were mobilized when the outcome of the election in Florida was uncertain. That Jeb Bush had only purged 50,000 black people from the voting rolls. He needed to have purged 60,000 in order to make a clear win for George W. And so they immediately jumped all over that when it was still undecided. This time around, there are several states, particularly with Greg Palast's cross-check information, that clearly look like they were stolen by the Republicans. And where are the Democrats?
I live in Florida.
Crickets.
And,
crickets.
It was bad. And then, of course, later on, all the newspapers in Florida got together, did a count, and found out that Gore had actually won Florida by a large margin.
Yes.
Along with the country.
Yeah, according to the New York Times, by any measure, hanging chads, pregnant chads, missing chads, overvote, undervote, intention to vote, or whatever, by any measure, Al Gore won Florida in 2000. But that news was published, a month after 9/11 in November of 2001. It took them a year to recount those votes. Right. And as I think it was Schulzberger was the publisher of the New York Times at the time, whoever the publisher was, somebody asked him about that. Why did you bury that information in the 17th paragraph? And why did the headlines say that even if Gore had recounted the 3 states that he called for, he still would have lost, which was true. If he had just recounted Broward and the other 2 counties, he still would have lost. But the state Supreme Court had ordered to recount the entire state, and that's what the U.S. Supreme Court shut down. And so anyhow, they said, why did you bury that fact in the 17th paragraph that Al Gore actually won Florida and thus is the legal president of the United States? And he said, well, because 9/11 happened, and we don't want to diminish the credibility and authority of the president of the United States during a time of national crisis. Well, frankly, in retrospect, it would have been a really good time to get George Bush out of the way and Al Gore in there right after 9/11.
It does seem, going back to the other, it does seem like that you feel there's a moral problem with the Senate confirming him, and yet they were held for more than a year not to be able to do their job on this.
Confirming whom?
Why should Trump get the appointment?
Oh, Merrick Garland. Yeah, no, I'm not saying that there's a moral problem at all. I'm saying if it's legal and it can be done, I think they should do it. I just am very skeptical that they will. That's my concern. But maybe Harry Reid's still got something up his sleeve. We'll see. Steve, thanks for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'm super pleased to have in the studio with me Medea Benjamin. She is the co-founder of Code Pink and Global Exchange, codepink.org, of course, the website, globalexchange.org as well. You can tweet her at Medea Benjamin or at Code Pink. And you have spent, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome
Good
to
to
the
be here,
studio.
Tom.
Yeah, just get the microphone here right up for you. You have spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and have a first-person, sophisticated, deep understanding of, of that region that that I lack. That I mean, I think I know something about it, and I've spent some time there. But what are your thoughts on what we saw, this whole hoop-de-doop in Saudi Arabia with our president first?
Well, first, let's recognize that he was there the same weekend that the Iranians had an election where they came out in record numbers, 75%, to re-elect a moderate who is for not only the Iran nuclear deal, but for better relations with the West. And then at the same time, you have the Secretary of State Tillerson at a national press conference talking about how the Iranian people, we look forward to the day when they get the rights to free expression and free speech. And he's standing next to the Saudi foreign minister. And so a journalist naturally says, well, what about Saudi Arabia? And he refuses to answer that question. And then Trump comes, and there is Trump with a sea of despots from the Gulf region, all representing the Sunni world.
All hereditary kingdoms.
Hereditary
none of them
kingdoms,
elected.
you know, like Saudi Arabia, an absolute monarchy that has no pretense of constitution, no pretense of national elections, no political parties, no trade unions, no civil society, nothing that can be considered democratic. And there the president is saying how magnificent this kingdom is and how wonderful it is that we're selling these beautiful military weapons to the Saudis, the ones who are most responsible for spreading Wahhabi extremism around the world. It's surreal.
Yeah. It struck me that the president got played, that the Saudis put him in, they invited all these other Sunni nations. There's only a couple of majority Shiite nations, I believe.
And they weren't there.
Iraq was there, but the leader is not Shiite, he's Kurd, right?
Right.
And is there a third Shia majority nation?
Bahrain.
Bahrain. Oh, was Bahrain there?
Yeah, but it's not ruled by Shia majority.
It's a Shia majority, but it's ruled by the Sunnis.
A Sunni minority.
Yeah.
A very iron fist.
As was Iraq at one point,
right,
prior to her. And that basically, Donald Trump just inserted the United States into this war inside the world of Islam on the side of the most radical of the Sunnis, the Wahhabists, the Saudis. And I don't think he has any idea that he's done this.
Well, I don't know if he has any idea he's done this. I think what he cared about is the weapon sale and the jobs that are supposedly created by these weapons.
And that they loved him.
And they loved him. And one of the things I think is important to point out, people say, well, why didn't he go to Mexico or Canada as his first trip? You know what? There would have been big protests out there in Mexico and Canada and anywhere in Europe that he traveled. He loves going to Saudi Arabia because there's not a protester in sight, because if there were, they would be immediately arrested and flogged and imprisoned and tortured and maybe even at some point beheaded.
Did you see what Wilbur Ross said?
No.
Wilbur Ross, the billionaire commerce secretary, he came back and he said, there wasn't a single protester. It was so cool. Becky Quick was interviewing him, and she said, well, it's a police state.
I just wrote a whole piece about why there was no protest outside. But, I would say it really probably did figure into the calculation that Donald Trump wanted to go to a place where he would be regaled, where the red carpet would be laid on thick, and where there wouldn't be any protesters, certainly not on the inside, and in this case, not on the outside.
So over the next decade, we're giving the Saudis $300 billion worth of weaponry.
We're not giving them. They are paying,
them.
Which is
important. You're right. Yeah, that's an important point. And they also have announced this 2030 initiative that by 2030, right now they manufacture 3% of their own weaponry, and they want to have 50% of their weaponry being manufactured by 2030. So there's a technology transfer, much like we did with China when we moved our manufacturing over to China, and then the Chinese said, oh, this is how you do it. So we're basically giving away our jobs and our factories, at least in the defense industry, to Saudi Arabia over the next 13 years. And Donald Trump doesn't seem to realize that either. Or would he just rather not talk about it? Or is that
or will it happen after he is long gone?
Yeah, and so he doesn't get the blame
for it. Take responsibility for it. And remember, every time we give a certain kind of weapon to Saudi Arabia, the Israelis demand that we give them one up from that so that they're always technologically superior. So this does fuel the arms race. And also imagine what the Iranians are thinking, being encircled, knowing that they're going to get all this new weaponry in Saudi Arabia. And Bahrain, they just authorized a $2 billion sale there. The Iranians are caught because they have this agreement, but I'm sure they're going to put their best scientists on full speed ahead on new weapons as well. So all we're doing is fueling the arms race, fueling the sectarianism, and guaranteeing perpetual war in the Middle East.
What the weapons that we're selling them, what are they, and what should that tell us about how they're going to be used? I mean, right now they're using our weaponry against Yemen, and correct me if I'm wrong. And there's a major famine going on there, and cholera outbreaks, and apparently we've got a ship off the coast, and we're refueling the Saudi planes. Do I have this right?
Yeah, we've been refueling Saudi planes under Obama, just like we've been selling $115 billion worth of weapons under Obama. So let's not pretend this is new, that it's the Trump administration. And let's also remember the U.S. has been supporting the Saudi regime since its founding. But there's a qualitative difference now because the weapons deal is supposed to mushroom into the over $300 billion over the next decade, and because according to reports inside the administration, they are ready to give the green light for even further support for the Saudis in the war on Yemen. What are the deal is included in the deal? It's everything. It's ships, it's tanks, it's new planes, it's bombs, and part of it was this precision-guided munitions, which is something that the Obama administration put on hold and said it's only going to be used in Yemen, and it's only going to be used to kill more civilians in Yemen. And now the Trump administration says, let's go ahead and throw that into the package. But there's an important thing for your listeners to know, Tom, and that is Congress has the right to stop any of these weapons deals. It has 30 days from the time that it's announced officially by the executive branch to object to it. There were 42 different deals under the Obama administration, and there was a bit of a whimper from Congress towards the very end of things, but Congress never stopped any of these weapons deals. It's about time for Congress to stand up. And let's see those Democrats who refuse to question Obama finally stand up and in full force say, we oppose weapon sales to Saudi Arabia.
It needs to be stopped by a filibuster in the Senate. I mean, that's basically the only power Democrats have right now.
Well, they could be stopped if they also got some Republicans to join, and that's not far-fetched because there are Republicans both in the House and the Senate. Not all Republicans love Saudi Arabia. And I think in some ways, if there was a really good campaign, we could, I don't know that we could stop it at this point, but, there will be pieces of this deal that have to keep getting approved. And right now, for example, we could stop one piece, which is the precision-guided munitions, since we know that those will be used in Yemen. But I want your listeners to know one other thing, which is the tanks, for example. Nobody in the media is talking about the Saudi tanks that are rolling into a Shia town of Awamiya. Right now, as we speak, that town is under siege. Under the
town is in what country?
It's in Saudi Arabia. It's the Shia minority, 10% of the population, always been oppressed. They live in the most oil-rich part of the country, the eastern province. And the town of Awamiya has been invaded by the Saudi military with U.S. tanks, with U.S. weapons. And they are shooting at civilians. They are terrifying the entire town. And why isn't anybody in the media talking about it? Well, one of the things is the Saudis won't let any journalists go there. So what are the Saudis going to use the weapons for? What they have been using it for? Repress people internally, mostly the Shia minority, put down uprisings, democratic uprisings overseas like they did in Bahrain with U.S. tanks, continue to bomb the poor Yemeni people, and then to support al-Qaeda affiliates in Syria and Iraq.
And export Wahhabism all around the world. Trump in his speech called out the Houthis as terrorists. This is the group in Yemen that the Saudis are bombing the bejesus out of.
Right.
Who are these people?
So the Houthis are an indigenous group. I personally think the Houthis are to blame for taking their grievances the military route, but they did that. And then the Saudis said, they're supported by Iran, which was not true in the beginning. It was an indigenous uprising. Of course, when you get to the point where the Saudis get involved, the Houthis look for support wherever they can get it. Are
they Shia?
They are a type of religious group that is closer to the Shia. Okay. So the Saudis, thinking that this would be a couple of weeks intervention and they could put the president, who was an interim president, he was voted in an election that he was the only one on the ballot, and he was only supposed to be there for a year. He stayed on longer, and now when the Houthis overthrew him, he fled to Saudi Arabia and asked the Saudis to intervene. The Saudis have no right to intervene in the internal affairs of another country, and the majority of the destruction that's going on in Yemen right now is coming from the Saudi bombing.
Wow. Is there, we just have 2 minutes, Medea, thoughts, the president is in Israel now, thoughts on any possibility whatsoever that anything positive might come out of this with regard to the Palestinian situation?
Are you kidding me? I mean, the only thing that will come out is negative, because there is still this terrible idea of moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. There is still this terrible U.S. ambassador to Israel now, who has been a longtime supporter, physically, financially, of illegal settlements. He will only inflame the situation in Israel-Palestine, and between the desire of Israel and the Saudis to get the U.S. to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal and go into a war with Iran, we're in for very dangerous times if the American people don't speak out and force Congress to do something about this.
I just saw a documentary that said that, a Dutch documentary that said that Jared Kushner was a member of Chabad.
I don't know, but we have to know that. Do you know what role he played in sealing the Saudi deal? That no. He met previously, right before Trump arrived there, to negotiate the deal. When the Saudis talked about the price of something, he picked up the phone and called the CEO of Lockheed Martin and said, "Can we lower the price of this?" Yeah. So there he is negotiating a better deal for the Saudis. For selling weapons.
Yeah, with American companies. Yeah, you American companies, you can't make a profit. We got to help the Saudis. But remarkable stuff. It's just remarkable stuff. Do you have any hope for peace in the Middle East?
Well, eventually there's got to be political solutions. And, Donald Trump, as crazy as he is, could play a good role if he had decent relations with Russia and said, okay, now we're going to bring Iran into this whole thing and let's sit down and unravel this mess.
That's what Obama tried to do. And it's almost like because Obama did it, Trump's not going to do it.
Well, maybe Trump will be forced to do it. But I think that it's high time Americans started opening their eyes to what's going on. The U.S. involved in 7 wars in the Middle East, and saying that enough is enough, that Trump might take us into the 8th war with Iran, which would be a
You're
really
listening
big
to the
one.
Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Thank you. Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Code Pink, codepink.org. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from the Thom Hartmann Reader, and this is from page 39, chapter titled An Informed and Educated Electorate. The epigraph, the quote that opens the chapter, is from Thomas Jefferson. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Whenever the people are well informed, however, they can be trusted with their own government, that whenever things get so far wrong as to attract their notice, they may be relied upon to set them right. Into the chapter. Talk radio news service based in Washington, D.C. is owned and run by my dear friend Ellen Ratner. Ellen is an experienced and accomplished journalist, and a large number of interns and young journalism school graduates get their feet wet in reporting by working for her. In March 2010, I was in Washington for a meeting with a group of senators, and I needed a studio from which to do my radio and TV show. Ellen was gracious enough to offer me hers. I arrived as 3 of her interns were producing a panel discussion type of TV show for web distribution at talkmedianews.com, in which they were discussing for their viewing audience their recent experiences on Capitol Hill. One intern panelist related that a White House correspondent for one of the big 3 TV networks had told her that the network registered a huge amount of interest in the hot story that week of a congressman's sexual indiscretions. Far less popular were stories about the debates on health care, the conflicts in the Middle East, and even the Americans who had died recently in Iraq or Afghanistan. The intern said, so that's the story they have to run with on the news, relating the substance of the network's correspondents' thoughts, because that's what the American people want to see. If the network doesn't give people what they want to see, viewers will tune away, and the network won't have any viewers, ratings, or revenues. The other 2 interns commiserated with the first about what a shame it was that Americans wanted the titillating stories instead of the substantive ones, but they accepted without question that the network was therefore obliged to, quote, give people what they want, end quote. When they finished their panel discussion, I asked these college students if they knew that there was a time in the United States when radio and TV stations and news networks broadcast the actual news instead of infotainment because the law required them to. None of them had any idea what I was talking about. But the reality is that from the 1920s, when radio really started going big in the United States, until Reagan rolled it back in 1987, federal communications law required a certain amount of public service programming from radio and television stations as a condition of retaining their broadcast licenses. The agreement was basic and simple. In exchange for the media owners being granted a license from the Federal Communications Commission to use their airwaves, owned by the public, they had to serve the public interest first, and only then could they go about the business of making money. If they didn't do so, when it came time to renew their license, public groups and individuals could show up at public hearings on the license renewal and argue for the licenses being denied. One small way that stations lived up to their public service mandate was by airing public service announcements for local nonprofit groups, community calendars, and other charitable causes. They also had to abide by something called the Fairness Doctrine, which required them to air diverse viewpoints on controversial issues. Separately, during election campaigns, broadcasters had to abide by the equal time rule, which required them to provide equal airtime to rival candidates in any election. But the biggest way that they proved that they were providing a public service and meeting the requirements of the Fairness Doctrine was by broadcasting the news, real news, actual news, local, national, and international news produced by professional old-school journalists. Because the news didn't draw huge ratings like entertainment shows, although tens of millions of Americans did watch it every night on TV and listen to it at the top of every hour on radio from coast to coast. And because real news was expensive to produce, with bureaus and correspondents all over the world, news was a money loser for all of the big 3 TV networks and for most local and radio and national radio and TV stations. But it was such a sacred thing. This was, after all, the keystone that held together the station's license to broadcast and thus to do business. It didn't matter if it lost money. It made all the other money-making things possible. Through much of the early 1970s, I worked in the newsroom of a radio station in Lansing, Michigan. It had been started and was then run by 3 local guys, an engineer, a salesman, and a radio broadcaster. They split up the responsibilities like you expect, and all were around the building most days and would hang out from time to time with the on-air crew, all except the sales guy. I was forbidden from talking with him because I worked in news. There could be no hint, ever, anywhere, that our radio station had violated the FCC's programming in the public interest mandate by, for example, by going easy on an advertiser in a news story or promoting another advertiser in a different story. News had to be news, separate from profits and revenue. And if it wasn't, I'd be fired on the spot. News, in other words, wasn't part of the free market. It was part of our nation's intellectual commons, and thus the price of the station's license. After Reagan blew up the Fairness Doctrine in 1987, 2 very interesting things happened. The first was the rise of right-wing hate speech talk radio, starting with Rush Limbaugh that very year. The second, which really stepped up after President Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act of '96, was that the money-losing news divisions of the big 3 television networks were taken under the wings of their entertainment divisions and wrung dry. Foreign bureaus were closed, reporters were fired, stories that promoted the wonders of advertisers owned by the same mega corporations began to appear, and investigative journalism began to die. It's the Thom Hartmann Reader.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at hartmanreport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Tim in Cortland, New York. Hey, Tim, thanks for the call. What's up?
Hey, Tom. In regards to a caller you had a little bit back about how long could we be stuck with a President Pence should Trump be shown the door?
Right. It's going to depend on whether it's before or after the 2018 election.
Correct. Because the amendment says 2 terms or 10 years.
Right.
So a vice president can assume no more than 2 years of a president's term if they should die in office or be removed.
Right.
So if we're lucky, it'll happen before the 18 election. We'll get rid of Trump. We'll have Pence for the remainder, and he can only run in 2020.
Yeah. Talking about scenarios and outcomes, but yeah. Tim, thank you. I tell you, we've got the smartest listeners around. Thank you, Tim. Nancy in East Hampton, Mass. Hey, Nancy, what's on your mind today? Nancy? Listening on 96.9 FM? No, Nancy, I'm not hearing you. You need to listen to your radio, your telephone, rather, not your radio. Kyle in Cleveland, Tennessee. Hey, Kyle, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Thom Hartmann. Hey, I really just want to thank you for, just the brilliant broadcast. I think you're a beacon for prosperity. And, I'm 25 years old here in Cleveland. And, I'm surrounded by conservative folks on pretty much every side of the aisle that I look. But I just wanted to call today and voice a concern about what your previous caller was actually talking about, Mike Pence, and his prospects in the Oval Office should something happen to Donald Trump, which is increasingly looking like a possibility, to the dismay of many people and to the praise of people like you and I. But it should that happen, if Mike Pence was installed into office, I think people should be really concerned because a lot can happen in some 700 days as a powerful man. Mm-hmm. And you really have to look at this guy's history. He was a tobacco lobbyist, and I don't know if you can kind of imagine a worse kind of person as someone who would go out there and install, strategies to convince people that cigarettes are not bad for you. I mean,
he was also a right-wing talk show host. I've debated Mike Pence, and he's this guy. I mean, you look up slimy in the dictionary, and there's his picture. He's not. People underestimate him at their own peril. And he's a hard right fundamentalist, and bizarre. I mean, he refers to his wife by mother. He calls her mother. I mean, just strange. There's something really wrong with this guy. I don't know how to say it beyond that. And
I agree. We should be cautioned.
Yeah, and the policies that he would promote would be, very, pro patriarchy, pro male white power, all that kind of stuff. I mean, the site that I was sharing with people earlier, which was here it is, officialmikepence.com. Of course, it's a spoof site, but there's just enough there to make you go, whoa, wait a minute. And this might not just be a spoof site. I mean, obviously it is, but it's like this is how it could go down. Kyle, thank you. I share your concern tremendously. I share your concern. David in Salem, South Carolina. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, Tom. I've been watching you since the beginning, and I just wanted to make 2 comments on what you were talking about. I went to go see the official Mike Pence, and you just mentioned that about how he calls his wife Mother, and there's a whole section there, letters to Mother.
Right.
And it's like, should I get new pajamas? And it's like, well, you don't want skin showing.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Through the old pajamas. But I wanted to mention something about Saudi Arabia, and there was an author who's since passed on. He was a Saudi author, and his name was Abdurrahman Munif, and he wrote a trilogy called Cities Assault was the first one, and it actually went in reverse, and it was The Trench, and then I think Visions of Night and Day, I think was, and it tells of basically the takeover. Well, it's from the Saudi Arabian perspective, and so sometimes it's kind of hard to follow, but it tells of when the Americans and British came in, and it was like, in the 20s and 30s when oil was discovered, and they were, I have a degree in anthropology, and they're saying, well, why are they asking, the names of my grandfather and everybody like that? And, they were obviously getting the connections going. And he doesn't call it Saudi Arabia, he calls it Muran, and Kurbayef or something is but he gives these very visual descriptions of Ibn Saud, and because of that, it's all very, very negative. And he had his Saudi citizenship stripped from him, and like pain of death to show up in Saudi Arabia. And he lived in Lebanon and
Ibn bin Saud founded Saudi Arabia. Is that who I'm thinking of? The guy?
Yeah. And I mean, it's of how the society was transformed, and then there was the backing of Ibn Saud, who is this Kurbayef in the book. But at any rate, everybody in the Middle East knows who he's describing by the descriptions and the descriptions of the wives. But I just wanted to say that the interesting part of it is that he has this guy who's actually, they figure was Kim Philby's father, who worked over there and taught them. And,
Kim Philby, the spy?
Was, of course, an intelligence operative.
Right.
But they have a couple of diplomats, and really, that's the same with John Brennan. When Brennan of the CIA went over to Saudi Arabia, it was like St. John, or Harry Philbin, Harry St. John Philbin. He went native and supposedly became, Muslim and that. And there's a lot of talk in the State Department and such that John Brennan became, a secret Muslim in order to please the Saudis. But he was opposed to the 9/11 report coming out, and when the USS Cole was blown up, he ran interference on the FBI teams over there. I mean, Brennan is really quite a dark figure, but what Munif really comes across is that the Saudi royal family is controlled by Westerners. I know a lot of people go, oh, come on, but, he really gets into the weeds of describing how they are manipulated, and they're corrupted by, Western items and...
or certainly were initially.
Yeah, and I mean, that, and of course, they're not but it's all the Saudi society talking about naked women, which are women in, Western women in bathing suits, right?
Yeah.
But at any rate, it's just kind of I'm just sort of recommending it. It's a trilogy, but if you read just the Cities Assault, it's more the
Cities Assault.
The Cities Assault is more of the modern. If you read the Visions of Night and Day, that's more under Ibn Saud. Yeah. And the Trench, I think, is when he basically takes on the Ikhwan. But at any rate, I'm sort of recommending that. It's kind of a tough read, but it's really kind of interesting in that how did the Saudis view the Westerners, and and what was the influence that they had, and who's really kind of pulling the strings.
Yeah, it really is it's a pretty amazing story of a basically, hunter-gatherer tribal society, or pastoralist at the very most, 5th century society basically being brought into the modern era because of oil. It's just incredible. David, thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And then the oil gets turned into money, and the money gets turned into power, and boom, Donald Trump shows up and goes, hey, look at all the gold. I love it. And welcome back, Kirk in Ukiah, California. Hey, Kirk, what's on your mind?
Oh, well, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Well, I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks
Kirk,
ago.
it sounds like you're in the bottom of a tin can. If you've had me on speakerphone, if you could take it off, I'd appreciate it.
Is this better?
Yeah, a lot better. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Last week or week before last, I called in and had Mark Pocan on the program and expressed concern about the Democratic leadership. And I just noticed an article in the Chronicle, San Francisco Chronicle, this morning that at the state Democratic convention this past weekend, there was a very close race for the leadership. Eric Bauman defeated a Bernie supporter. Her name was Kimberly Ellis, and by 62 votes. And then they wouldn't recount. They said that John Burton, who was the former lead in the Democratic Party, said, no, we're not going to do a recount. There's no provision for that. And created a lot of problems, apparently. And in fact, according to the article, Burton flipped off the crowd when they got a little raucous. So anyway, this is going to be a big concern, I think. And this was at the front page above the fold article in the San Francisco Chronicle, which I know is a liberal newspaper. But anyway, I wanted to get your thoughts on changing the leadership of the Democratic Party.
I think it's going to happen organically. It's going to take some time, but there's a new generation coming up. And, in some ways they're being portrayed as having a value system that is new. And it sure looks to me like it's FDR, which was pretty new and pretty radical at the time. But that time was 90 years ago, 80 years ago. But I think that, a Bernie-crat losing, was this for the control of the entire state Democratic Party in California?
Correct.
Yeah. A Bernie-crat losing something like that by just 60 some odd votes, that is actually very impressive. I mean, Jerry Brown's no Bernie-crat. He's a good guy, but he's
right.
Kind of an establishment Democrat. And the establishment Democrats have most of the power in the state of California. And people who are in many ways in bed with various industries. And go ahead.
Yeah. This fellow Bauman, I don't know anything about him, but apparently he's has his own political consulting firm and receives quite a bit of money from the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
So you know what? The old guard is not getting the money out of politics.
No. Well, and in some places they can't. I mean, if you're Dianne Feinstein or Barbara Boxer, Kamala Harris, or now, if you're looking at running a statewide election, you can't, or maybe you can, but it'd be very, very difficult to do that just with local donations, and a state as large as California. And as long as your opposition is going to be bringing in billionaire money and corporate money, you're kind of stuck with this, or most candidates in large states are. And that's why we need to change the rules of the game, because the rules of the game have been changed by the Supreme Court for the worse. And that's why we need to amend the Constitution. That's why I say go to movetoamend.org and check it out. Kirk, thank you for the call. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Joseph in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Hey, Joseph, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I want to make a comment about us and Iran, our history. But I was going to say Pence is in some ways worse than what's his name? Trump. He's more cunning, Yeah. We need to wait till after the mid things and take back the House, and then get both of them out of there.
Yeah.
That's the best case scenario. But
I'm all in favor of that.
I just wanted to say, about us and Iran. what have we done to Iran? We stole their oil, back in the day, us and the Brits. When they kicked us out, then and elected somebody to get us out of there, we overthrew them and put in our dictator for a long time. We gave Iraq chemical weapons to use against them in their war. We blew an airliner out of the sky without even an apology, and like it was their fault because it was menacing somehow, and nobody held accountable for it. And then what have they done to us? When they overthrew this dictator, they took hostages of our people who'd been helping. Didn't hurt a one, and then the worst thing they did to us was through that they got Reagan elected because they knew that he was going to sell them parts for all these weapons they had. I just don't understand why there's such a hatred of Iran. I really just don't get it.
Yeah. Well, the big hit on Iran is that they have supported Hezbollah, and Hezbollah has supported terror attacks against Israel. And so I think a lot of the hatred, quote, hatred of Iran in the United States is coming, via people who hold sacrosanct Israel, that Israel can do no wrong. And whether it's the fundamentalist Christians who think that, all but 144,000 Jews have to die and they need to convert to Christianity in the last moments and then Jesus will return. And they're pouring all this money and evangelism into Israel, and the Israelis kind of look at them and laugh, but are pleased to take their money. Or it's the expansionists, the people who want Israel to kick the Palestinians out altogether and continue the settlements and all that.
I don't know about Hezbollah. Somebody needs to help the Palestinians. My God, we're helping the Israelis, and it's been a pretty much one-sided affair through the whole thing. Yeah. So I was in Vietnam, and I know that East Germany was bad-mouthed about because they were helping the Viet Cong, and I came to realize, my goodness, I admire somebody helping them. I mean, they're the underdog, and I don't know that it's so bad if there's an overwhelming force like the U.S. or with all the weapons we have fighting against a country that doesn't even have an air force, and so sometimes somebody has to come to the aid of these people. Maybe they're bad, but I don't think that's a reason to hate Iran. And I think we should be, if we did, in Vietnam, if we'd have just sent aid to those people, they would have been our best friends.
Oh, I know. I know. Same thing in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was the second poorest country in the world. Right, the GDP of the entire country was $2 billion a year. That's all, the entire country, the entire economic activity of the entire country. And we're spending, probably when all is said and done, something on the order of $3 to $4 trillion in Afghanistan. And if we had simply said to them, give us bin Laden, which they offered to do, by the way, Mullah Omar offered to give bin Laden to George W. Bush after 9/11. And if George W. Bush had simply said, yes, we'll take him. And by the way, here's $4 billion. Your country is now 3 times richer than you used to be. Build some infrastructure, build some schools, come into the 21st century. And, the world would be a very different place right now if George Bush had decided to do that. But no, he wanted to have a little war. He had told his biographer, Mickey Herskowitz, back in 1999 that he wanted to have a little war, and he was going to have his little war. And his daddy had a war with Kuwait, and it helped him politically. And Ronald Reagan had his little war with Grenada, and Maggie Thatcher had her little war with the Falklands, and all these little wars, they were so useful. And I'm just concerned that Donald Trump wants a little war, and that we're at that point in time in the cycles of history where a little war will become a big war. It'll become a world war very, very quickly. Joseph, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Heil Hui in Stoughton, Mass.
Howie in Stoughton. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm well. How are you, Howie?
Very, very well. I can't agree with you in many things. I don't disagree in too many things, what have you. But unfortunately, I think we can't lay it all on Donald Trump right now. But the fact is, when he mentions deep swamp, this swamp goes all the way back 50 years to Vietnam. You mentioned Afghanistan, so forth and so on. We have a deep government that nobody knows who's running the country anymore. I live in the Boston area. I recall I just returned from the Middle East on the morning of September the 10th, and the only planes that were allowed to leave the Logan Airport, I recall, were planes taking back the Saudi students back to Saudi Arabia.
Specifically, the bin Laden family.
That is correct, and they owned Harvard and BU and so forth. But the Saudis own Washington, as you probably know, the biggest lobbyist in Washington. And it's all about money. And money, and the only way these bankers and folks are making money is war. And I served in Vietnam as well. And I have no trust in government. So this swamp is so deep, I don't know what the answer is. Do you have any comment?
I think the answer is an informed, educated, and activated populace, and I think we're moving in that direction, and I think that's a good thing. But I don't disagree at all with your analysis, your diagnosis, Howie, and it is problematic. I got to move along, but thank you for the call. James in Spokane, Washington. Hey, James, what's up?
Baruch haba there to you, Tom. I'm going to beat my drum one more time. Thank you for your time. The war on drugs is still denying the left any traction. It has corralled, diminished, and made absent the progressive movement in this country and the world. We're still cut off at the knees so long as we allow them to continue to use it as a weapon.
Yeah.
A rhetorical question for you. We use some drugs for pain management. Why do we think they're being abused?
Because people are in pain.
Thank you.
Yeah, psychic pain right now. People are in psychic pain because of 40 years of Reaganism has just ripped the guts out of the American middle class, and put a reverse, a squealing reverse on advances being made by minorities in this country that really picked up steam after 1965. Yeah, James, I totally agree with you. Thank you for the call. Gabe in Brunswick, Ohio. Hey, Gabe, what's on your mind?
How you doing today, bud?
Good.
Thom Hartmann. I just want to say I listen to your show all the time. Thank you very much. And what I want to ask is I want to talk about the elections that are coming up, for the replacements of, Rob Quest is going against a guy who owns Microsoft, and, because they're going to replace these people. And then we got John Ossoff. And I'm hoping for these guys to win. And, we work on getting a head start to gain control of Congress.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, there's these special elections coming up. Rob Quist is running for Ian Zinke's seat in Oklahoma, and Ossoff is running for Tom Price's seat in Georgia, and both of them have a chance. And people need to be supportive of these guys, and be sure to turn out and vote. And the election in Montana is this week, isn't it? Isn't it tomorrow? Or is it a week from tomorrow?
And I also have when I see these primaries, I also see you've heard of Debbie Wasserman Schultz went against Tim Canova, right?
Yeah.
I campaigned really heavily for Canova, and Canova is obviously a Bernie-crat, and it's unbelievable that Debbie Wasserman Schultz would win against Tim Canova, and
Oh, she's been representing your district for a long time. I mean, she's just, nobody's all good and all bad. Gabe, we're out of time. Thank you for the call. I'm no fan of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but she did get reelected. That should tell you something about at least how the people in her district think of her. And she won the primary against Tim Canova, right? So anyhow, that said, thank you for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow. It's going to be a very, very interesting week. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you get out there, get active, tag, you're it. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeats.com.